My entitled brother-in-law wakes me up from a nap, demanding that I make him dinner, stating that as long as me and my family are staying in his house temporarily, then I need to be in the kitchen just like his wife, making him dinner whenever he wants. And I'm honestly blown away by this situation, and I now don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my husband, who we will call Tom, as well as our 2 sons, were recently in a house fire and lost our home, but luckily we were all out of the house when this happened. Tom's brother, who we will call Sean, as well as his wife, agreed to let us stay at his place with their kids while we sort out insurance. Now, I don't like Sean, as he believes in traditional gender roles in his household. We have had issues ever since he realized I would keep my maiden name at work, which I informed him was none of his business, and it was my personal choice. He works full-time and his wife is a housewife. When we had our sons, Sean thought that I would quit my job as a doctor and become a stay-at-home mom. However, Tom became a stay-at-home dad instead, and then went back to work after our son went to school, and doesn't share the same thought process as Sean. Sean clearly disapproves of this and me, and he vocalized his thoughts about the situation. I got Tom to speak to Sean, and he has left us alone ever since then, but occasionally used to make comments at holidays and birthdays, about which I just completely ignore. They stopped when Tom returned to work, and since then, Tom says that Sean has grown as a person. Tom and Sean are very close, and I would never tell him to stop talking to him, but I personally interact as little as possible with Sean. My son's school and Tom's workplace is walking distance from Sean's house, which is why I agreed to stay, and suck it up while we get back on our feet, as it is temporary. Yesterday was a very hectic day at work, and I was exhausted. My shift ended midday, and I went straight to bed. Everyone was out of the house, and Sean and Tom went to work. The kids were at school, and Sean's wife went to see a friend. Well, Sean got home first, and he woke me up. Now, I was upset and still tired, and when I asked him why, he said to me that I should start making dinner as it was getting late, and his wife was out and not picking up her phone. Usually, I do the cooking in the house with his wife, but I was upset that Sean had woken me up, and I yelled at him to not disturb me. I then kicked him out of the room, and I told him I was going back to sleep and he could sort out his own dinner. When I woke up that evening, Sean told me that while I was under his house, I need to respect his house rules. I told him he could have cooked for himself, heated leftovers in the fridge, or gotten takeaway. Now, Tom thinks that Sean did overstep by waking me up and making demands, but I shouldn't have yelled and escalated the situation. So honestly, at this point, I'm incredibly pissed off and frustrated, and I really don't know what to do. Before we go any further, the original poster has an update to this situation. Here's what they had to say. Okay, to start things out, I didn't expect so many responses, and I have read quite a few of them. I spoke to a friend who said that we are welcome at her place. I told my husband I was leaving with the kids, and he was welcome to join me or stay at Sean's house. My brother-in-law didn't tell my husband the whole story and said I just flat out refused to cook, and then yelled at him out of tiredness when one of the conditions on us staying was that we would cook and help out around the house. I was upset that my husband believed Sean, but he also didn't have the full story. In our culture, we place a big emphasis on respecting elders, and I know I feel uncomfortable opposing elder relatives on my side of the family, so I get why my husband does struggle. This experience has made me put my foot down though, and I've told my husband I don't want our sons anywhere near him. I think this has also been an eye-opener for my husband, and he has agreed to move out with me, although my brother-in-law asked him to stay. When we get our place sorted out, only my sister-in-law and my kids' cousins will be allowed over. My sister-in-law has called to apologize for my brother-in-law's behavior, but here's the thing, I have not heard from him at all. He was silent to me and only talked to my husband and the kids. I agreed to move in with my brother-in-law as I believed that he had changed in his beliefs, and it had been a few years since our last fight, but apparently not. Also, the house belonged to my husband's late parents, and he owns half of it. Also, with our insurance, they have finally ruled the fire as a faulty electrical situation in the kitchen, so we will get a place of our own by Friday. But regardless, I hope I never deal with my brother-in-law ever again, because what he did to me was absolutely uncalled for. Holy crap, that guy is such an awful person. Sean literally walked over to the original poster and said, "Hey, while you're in my house, you need to cook in the kitchen." Basically saying, oh yeah, women belong in the kitchen while you're under my roof. It's like, dude, what are you doing? If you want to try that crap with your wife, I guess go for it, even though I think it's wrong. But to do that crap to somebody else's wife under the guise of, oh, if you're under my house, you have to follow my rules. Like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about, but that is not gonna happen. You can't boss someone around and like take away their autonomy, all because you're hungry and you want dinner. Who's gonna make my dinner now? It's like, dude, what are you talking about right now? Order a pizza, heat up some leftovers, cook for yourself, do something. Don't drag a guest in your house into this and be like, oh, if you're gonna be in my house, you gotta follow the rules. And it's like, your rules are super sexist. What are you talking about? Oh, okay, so you make the women cook for you? What are you, like 12 years old? So yeah, this whole scenario is so messed up, it's not even funny. But I'm honestly super glad the original poster put this guy in his place, this. Because him not only saying this to you, but also trying to lie about it, in my opinion, is a massive red flag. And I know if I was in your shoes, I would never deal with this guy ever again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Today, I kicked a client out the door of my store because he came in 5 minutes before closing and tried to ask 1,000 questions before we were done for the day. But I truly was not willing to deal with that, and so I asked him to leave. Here's what happened. Okay, so I work at a copy center, and we print documents and photos. And at 9:54 p.m., a guy came in to print business cards. First of all, why in the world is he here 5 minutes before closing? Secondly, he came in with something that can't be solved in 5 minutes because A, it's just business cards, and B, he started asking a bunch of stupid follow-up questions, meaning he had no idea what he needed. You're probably guessing that business cards are printed and sliced on a machine in large runs, and it's not done in a regular office with a Xerox machine. Even if it isn't true, that's fine, because you likely listen politely to my explanation, realize you won't get the results you want now, and go home afterwards. Well, he didn't go home, but continued to ask if it was possible to print on a regular sheet of paper right now. Now I, knowing the tricks of Xerox, said that no, double-sided printing of business cards will not work, and the color will definitely not be the same. He continued to insist that he needed these stupid business cards and asked how long it would take me to adjust this layout, to which he received a direct answer: none. I will not be doing it, especially now. But even after that, he did not calm down and asked to make him at least one-sided. To finally make him go away, I even printed him a couple of sheets of his business cards on plain paper. Now let me clarify, I don't mind getting into a person's situation if they urgently need to do something, or even just to help them out even if my working hours are over, but this one came with a blissful smile and a pile of questions, not giving a single care about the fact that it was not my working hours. What really got me was when he started asking irrelevant questions, stuff like, where did you go to college? And again, nothing wrong with small talk, but not at 10 o'clock p.m. I realize he's a total jerk, and at this pace he's going to sit here until he's tongue-tied or ends up staying to hit on me. I asked him if he would like to take these papers, which by the way, of course he didn't like the color, and he said no. So I just pointed to the door with a straight hand and I said goodbye. And I honestly hope I don't deal with that guy ever again. I love this story for a few reasons, but the biggest one is the fact that you decided, no, I'm not going to stay here past hours and deal with your garbage. So that means you either have really good managers who let you kind of like function on your own, or you just don't care and you're like, look, I'm not dealing with this. Because both sides of this coin are awesome, and I love this about this story. Because I've been in situations where I have managers who are like, no, you have to stay and help them out. And it's like, dude, it's 10 o'clock at night. Are you kidding me right now? I want to go home. But the fact that you told this guy, okay, take a hike and leave, I cannot help you right now, that is hilarious to me, and it's very well deserved. And I personally have the same attitude as the original poster. If there really is some kind of like emergency and they need these business cards like right away, then sure, you help them out and you get it done. But I think this guy was literally just wasting everybody's time, and that is super annoying. So good for you for getting this done, because if I was in your shoes, I would have tried to do the exact same thing. I pay my brother $100,000 a year while also giving him the freedom to choose his own hours and do his work at his own pace. But even still, he constantly complains, leaving me in a position where I am literally questioning everything. Here's what happened. So I spent the last 7 years building my business to support myself initially, and now my brother. He has had a lot of mental health struggles in his 20s, but he pushed through it. He left a stable white-collar job he hated and started a $12 an hour retail gig right before the pandemic. He got furloughed, and I happened to get a call for a dream job I couldn't refuse. And I spent the next 3 months between training my brother and onboarding for this new company. 4 years later, and it didn't work out, and we are working together again. Now, you would think he would be grateful, but I wouldn't be posting here if he was, now would I? He makes $100,000 a year doing work that should take 6 hours a day at max. Now, I don't tell him when to work, I don't restrict his time off, and he chooses what orders he wants to accept or reject. He has the ability to make $150,000 a year if he wanted to put in a full day's work. Now, sounds great, right? Well, no, that's wrong. He constantly complains. He has to respond to client inquiries from 9 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. But because he's so busy, he needs my help, despite the fact that I already answer all messages outside of business hours and on weekends. If he sees that a message hasn't been responded to in an hour, and I said I was helping that day, he berates me for not communicating that I'm online and accuses me of not doing my job. He constantly tells me that I don't care about the business. All the while, I'm literally completing double his workload, covering 3 times more hours of client chats. He has told me I need to tell him if I'm not going to be available and when I'm going to be offline, even though my schedule has zero impact on his responsibilities or his expectations as an employee. I'm really frustrated. I'm feeling like the actual roles here are reversed. first, and in reality, he's just a super entitled brat. What should I do? Wow, your brother gets paid $100,000 a year, and he wants to sit there and complain? Not to mention the fact that he could be making more money if he put in a full days of work. Like, this guy just sounds straight up lazy. Like, I'm sorry, that is so unbelievably toxic. So I know if I was the owner of this company and I had a brother working like this, I would tell him straight up, listen, if you don't like what's going on, or if you can't handle your job, then please, by all means, find something else. Like, I know plenty of people who would love to have a job like that, where they set their own hours, they're not being micromanaged, and they can make 6 figures in a year. Like, are you serious right now? That's a dream. Not to mention the fact that he can make more money than his standard paycheck. So yeah, hopefully your brother sees the light of day and realizes that he has a dream job right now, because he can either get it together and figure his life out, or he could easily find himself getting fired from this job. This next story came from the Am I the Jerk subreddit. Check the links in the description if you would like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for not giving a Karen customer the sandwich that she deserved? Because this lady literally complained over nothing, and I'm honestly wondering if I'm gonna have a job at the end of the day. Here's what happened. So I work at a small family-owned deli. It's a cozy spot and we pride ourselves on good food and good service. One day during the lunch rush, a woman, who I will refer to as Karen, comes in with her kid. She immediately starts inspecting the sandwiches on the counter like she's at a museum. But honestly, whatever. I'm used to picky customers, so this isn't unusual. She orders a turkey sandwich, but when I ask if she wants it toasted, she snaps at me and says, no, I don't want it toasted. I want it fresh, not burnt. I assure her that our bread is always fresh, and we don't toast unless specifically asked for it. She's calm for a second, but then she eyes the deli meats and says, I want my turkey sliced thinner, like really thin. Is that too much to ask? I look at her a little surprised because our turkey is already sliced pretty thin, but I nod and I tell her I'll pass the request along to the slicer. I wrap up the sandwich and I hand it to her, but then she suddenly starts waving her hands dramatically. This is not what I asked for, she exclaims, causing the entire line of customers to turn and look. Now I'm just standing there thinking, what could possibly be wrong? She then points at the sandwich. This turkey is way too thick. Do you not know how to make a sandwich? Now at this point, I'm trying to stay professional, but I can't help but feel a little frustrated. I know the turkey isn't thick, but I ask her, would you like me to remake it with thinner slices? She then lets out a huff. No, I want to talk to your manager. This is ridiculous. So I go to the back and I tell my manager, who's already heard the whole ordeal. She then walks out to confront this Karen. She then starts screaming, this is terrible customer service. I should be getting the best sandwich of my life for what I paid for. Now my manager is super chill, but when Karen starts yelling, my manager just nods and calmly says, I'm sorry you're upset. We can remake your sandwich or refund you. Which would you prefer? The Karen's face then turns red. I want a refund, and I'm telling all my friends about how bad this place is. You don't know how to make a sandwich. I want your store shut down. My manager doesn't even flinch. She gives the Karen her full refund and says, I'm sorry we couldn't meet your expectations, and I hope you find a place that better suits you. As the Karen storms out, I hear muttering, I'm going to make sure this place never survives. Now the best part about this is that one of the regulars who had been watching the whole scene said to me, hey, don't worry kid, you can't please everybody. Some people just need a good sandwich to chew on instead of drama. And after they said that, we all had a really good laugh, and it definitely lightened the mood. Honestly, it was one of those days where I just had to remind myself that not everyone gets their way, and sometimes people just need a moment to be heard, even if it's over a sandwich. Yeah, I've dealt with people like this before, and honestly, it is so weird. It's almost like they want to be upset over something, and it's like, okay, I guess if I'm the person to get yelled at, go for it. It's never fair, and it's never something you want to deal with, but the Karen in this story kind of fits that bill. So good for you for the way you handled it, because you honestly didn't do anything wrong. Am I the jerk for watching my best friend's favorite show after she told me all about it and then told me not to watch it? Here's what happened. Okay, so I want to watch my best friend's favorite show at the moment after she kept talking to me about it, and I eventually decided that I wanted to check it out. When I told her I wanted to, she told me not to, as she likes to keep her favorite things private to her so they feel more special and personal, and so I don't potentially criticize them, because she says any criticism will ruin it for her. And as a side note, I have a long history of being a bit heavy-handed with criticizing, to be completely honest, but I'm a lot better now than I used to be. For a bit more context, me and my friend are pretty much each other's only friends, just because we're both fairly weird and kind of socially awkward, and just don't go out and meet new people much, and both have a fair share of flaws which we don't mind about each other, and as a result have been friends for about 6 years. We both like anime and talk about it quite a lot, and she's been talking to me about this new one for a couple of months, all the way to the point where I wanted to go watch it and see if I'd like it as well. My friend has a weird thing, however, that she likes to keep her most favorite things personal to herself, so that they feel more unique and special for her, which I'm normally fine with, as we'll still talk and yap about them anyways, even if I haven't seen them. This show is one of these things that she likes to keep personal, and yet we still keep on talking about it, and she shows me clips since I'm the only person that she can really share them with. Eventually, all of this has convinced me to watch it, but she's always insisted insisting that I don't. And we've been through this specific debate a couple of times now, but we still keep yapping about the show happily anyways. Despite that, I have started to watch it, as I don't really want to let her just gatekeep it from me, and generally, I don't think media or culture is something that should be kept behind any bars. It's also not even about embarrassment either, as she never would have talked to me about it so much, and from everything I've seen of it so far, it's completely fine considering how well we know each other. I probably won't ever tell her I've watched it at all, as I know that she'll get upset by it, having known her for like 6 years now, and it'll be this whole ordeal that will just be a pain and mean nothing eventually. This is the only time it's really come to me actually wanting to watch, and her wanting to gatekeep, and the only thing I'm really curious about is if other people think that I'm being a jerk by not listening to her, or if she's just gatekeeping the show and I shouldn't care about it. So seriously, am I the jerk in this situation? Because I really don't know what to do. Okay, in my opinion, I think everybody sucks in this story. The fact that the friend is trying to gatekeep this show, in my opinion, is really weird, but also it sounds like the original poster is really annoying about anything that they're shown. They're probably super obnoxious about their criticism about everything, and they kind of like kill the vibe when it comes to anything that someone else might enjoy. So to that end, I can't blame your friend for being like, no, please don't watch it. This is like the one good thing I have left that you haven't touched. But that also doesn't excuse your friend from like really gatekeeping this and being like, no, you're not allowed to watch this. Like both of the people in this story really need to like figure their lives out, because this is not normal behavior. So yeah, in my opinion, I think everybody sucks in this story. My entitled mother wants me to come back home and take care of her, despite the fact that she's treated me poorly my entire life. Here's what happened. So my mother, who adopted me when I was 6 years old, emotionally mistreated me and neglected me throughout my childhood. Most of my memories are filled with babysitters while she was living it up, school bullying and therapist, while she refused to believe that any of my problems stem from my relationship with her. I've been slowly working through my issues with a therapist and now live several hours away from her, and I work a full-time job as a news producer. As my mother has grown older, she's now become a shell of who she used to be. She is now a hermit, she does nothing, she loves being the victim, and she is condescending and very judgmental. She has an abundance of loyal friends who think she's a godsend, but all know there's something not quite right about her. On Sunday, I had to call 911 for her because she said she was feeling dizzy and had the sweats. After testing at the hospital, they found that she had a small ulcer that had caused minor bleeding. I've been in communication with the hospital this entire time, and her best friend of over 36 years, who lives about an hour away, was able to drive down to be with her. The ulcer has since been attributed to stress, bad dieting, and lack of exercise. Her friends and I have talked to her about this so many times, I honestly just don't even bother anymore. Aside from some discomfort, the hospital has her on an IV and will send her home with a prescription after an evaluation. When I spoke to my mother on the phone, she was very frustrated and complained about the situation. She also doesn't seem to understand that she's actually improving and said she wished that I could be there. Her friend also mentioned that my mother is adamant that she's not going home until she feels 100%, even if the doctor tells her that she can go home. But feeling 100% is unrealistic, especially at that age. Her friend told me that my mother needs to push herself more instead of just sitting around and waiting to feel 100% better. Her friend's doing as much as she can for my mother, but she can only stay until next Monday. My mother is perfectly mobile, and aside from this blip, she is in much better shape than a lot of people her age, and she absolutely could still eat better and be more active. If she fails the evaluation, then the hospital can suggest a rehabilitation clinic for her to go to. She also has several neighbors who are more than happy and have helped a great deal since she was put in the hospital. At this point, the only thing holding my mother back, it seems, is being home alone, despite that being something that she actually preferred before this incident. Again, her friend is staying until this Sunday, so even if my mother is released tomorrow, her friend will be there for another 4 days, and then my godfather and his friend will come and visit afterwards. But then there's the neighbors who are actively trying to get my mother to reach out to them for help. I have my own serious health problems that I'm trying to get under control, and I already work a high-stress job. The idea of taking time off indefinitely that I just don't have, to go back home and having to put myself under more stress, would honestly crush me, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, in my opinion, it really sounds like your mom needs like professional help, because from the sounds of it, you're not able to make this kind of sacrifice for her. You've got a lot going on, and it's not like you don't care, it's just that you don't have time. So hopefully this all works out for you, because this sounds incredibly messy. The disastrous new owners of a restaurant I used to work at drove out the hardworking staff of 3 years in a matter of days, and I'm honestly so glad that I don't work there anymore. Here's what happened. Okay, so my bar had to change its name for legal reasons, and they decided to rebrand into a sports bar with another company. My service team had been working together for 3 years since we opened the place, and said we would all come back to give it a shot. We were told to file for unemployment for a month and a half while they revamped, and that we would be hired right back. The general manager texted on a Saturday near that proposed opening date that they wanted people in Sunday afternoon. No email, but instead just an Android text less than 24 hours in advance. I was out of town, but I showed up a couple of days later, and I was told we'd be doing training, so I dressed appropriately. I then showed up to a restaurant in disarray and over 20 new TVs. And clearly, training would be accompanied by some manual labor first. The new owner asked me to clean out some trash cans, saying I'd wash them out to start the day, and then clean them at the end of the day. I started looking for the hose outside, and he told me that I'd need to soap them up first. As I was finishing, they asked me to wipe down the box fan. Then they asked me to spray paint some high chairs. I asked him for a mask, and I was then pointed to 2 used masks. I said I didn't want to use a used mask, and then I asked if I could go grab one from the first aid kit. I was then told this was not a good idea and was pointed back towards the used mask. In the midst of this, I was asked to clean out the box fan again. Mind you, this was a box fan that we had had for nearly 2 years that had a broken on-off switch, which I was spending more time at minimum wage to clean than it would cost to buy a new fan. Afterwards, my coworkers and I finished our tasks, and we were mumbling together about several concerning things and standing around while everyone else was eating lunch and tasting beer. The owner then came up to us and said the lean or clean thing with clenched fists, barely containing his anger. He told us to find something else to do. I asked if he wanted us to taste the beer, and he said no as he retorted smugly. I then heard him scream at one of the employees from his company shortly thereafter about a piece of paper that he himself had lost. While we had planned to give it a week, my coworkers and I met up and had a tough time tabulating the red flags, leading to people to finally admit that it was time to move on. Now, I thought I would stick it out for a couple more days, and I was even told for 2 successive days that we were doing training, but that just didn't end up happening. Just more general labor. We tasted some leftover food, but still not enough tables were ready. With 1 day before an invited prepaid event and 3 days before a soft opening with no food menu, no drink menu, or beer list, I realized that they were taking advantage of training to do a catering event, and I decided to leave. I then heard they hadn't hired any other service staff, and they were betting it all on us. But now that place is apparently a miserable revolving door, and honestly, I'm glad I got out of there. Yeah, that place sounds miserable, and I don't blame you for a second for quitting, because anyone who's going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to be doing some training, and then expects you to do manual labor is not someone you ever want to work for. An entitled old man forces me to get up from the disabled seating, claiming that my knee injury was not good enough of a reason for me to stay where he clearly wants to sit, and I've honestly never been more upset in my life. Here's what happened. So I have a bad knee, and we can't figure out what is wrong with it. It's not a big deal because most days it's just a bit achy, but sometimes it gets so bad that I cannot put any weight on it while it's bent. If I do, I will fall or probably make it worse. Those are rare days, but today was one of those days where I was basically limping with a knee brace. Lucky me, am I right? I was in pain, but I really needed to get my medication as well as my mother's medication from the pharmacy. She's just recovering from a major surgery that leaves her shoulder temporarily paralyzed, and I cannot drive yet, so I had to take the bus. The thing is that we live in a very rural village halfway up the mountain. There is no police station. There is literally no chain businesses. Nothing like Walmart or stuff like that. There's a couple of gas stations, but there's not even a doctor's office. They are working on a building with a walk-in clinic and a pharmacy, thank God. But in the meantime, all of those things are a highway away. It's been a blizzard yesterday and the whole night, so the roads and everything is covered in a good blanket of snow. But the weather itself today wasn't as bad. It was just cold. To make everything even worse, the buses only come down to my village once every 2 hours, and the connecting buses in the main city don't match up. So what would be a 30-minute trip to the pharmacy is now a 4-hour outing. So I'm in pain and it's cold, and I know I'm going to be wandering around Walmart aimlessly for at least 3 hours, but I'm willing to endure it because my mom really needs these meds, and I can't cope well without my own meds either. But it's not all bad because while I'm waiting, I can look for some Pokemon card deals or something like that. So finally, I get my medications, and I ended up buying some Pokemon cards for myself. And lo and behold, I was pleasantly surprised when a bus pulls up at the bus stop almost right away. My bus isn't this one, but I heard from my friends that this number has an end destination of my village and just goes the long way around. So I confirmed it with the driver and I got on, thinking I just won the lottery. I knew the route was bumpy, but I would be able to just sit for an hour and just relax until I could get home, check on my mom, and then open up my Pokemon cards. So I got on this bus and I sit down in the front row, which is reserved for physically disabled people. I really hate doing this, but my knee was getting the worst it's ever been from walking around, and I honestly didn't trust it to take me the few steps to the regular seating. I figured it wouldn't be a big deal, as this bus is usually very empty. Another nice lady in a wheelchair comes in and gets situated, which made me feel a bit uneasy, but I just shrugged it off. These buses are not designed in the best way as to fit a wheelchair in the proper space they have to flip up a whole section of seating. After a few stops, the bus is actually quite full for some reason, and I felt a bit stupid sitting there with my Pokemon box. But I'm only about 40 minutes from my village, so it's no big deal. An older gentleman comes onto the bus, and immediately he stares at me. I'm a bit of a meek person, so I avert my eyes immediately. I only look up when he clears his throat. He's glaring right down at me now. I try to subtly stretch my leg with the knee brace out to show him that I'm actually sitting here for a reason without actually engaging with him, because I really hate confrontation. He barely looks at it before he makes eye contact with me again. The old man looks at me and says, "Could you move?" I look at him and I say, "I'm really sorry, but I've been walking around all day." And before I could even continue to explain what's going on with my knee, he chimes in and says, Yeah, I've been walking all day as well. I think a young woman like you could stand a bit longer." I look at him and I say, "I've got a bit of a knee issue. It's pretty bad right now." And right about now, I wanted to shrink up into nothing, as I hate having attention and I hate taking up space. He looks at me and says, "Look, kid, just move. Wearing a knee brace doesn't mean that you get to take this seat from the elderly like me who need it." I wish I could say that I stood up for myself and that the other passengers backed me up, but really I just stood up and scurried into the corner by the door to try and shrink away. Thankfully, most of the other people pretended not to notice the exchange, and the old man didn't talk to me again after that. The bumpy ride was absolutely terrible the entire way home. When it comes to the old man, I don't completely fault him, because I take the bus often, and when I'm not temporarily disabled, I'm always standing or sitting in the regular seats if I can. Maybe he's seen me do this before and that's what's fueled his skepticism. I'm not really sure, but either way, it was a painful ride home, and I did end up getting some kind of Pokemon card that I liked, so I guess that's kind of a silver lining. That really sucks that the old man decided that you need to move. It makes me question whether or not there are even seats available that he could have taken, because it sounds like he was being the typical weird entitled person who just likes to claim everything in front of them as if it's theirs, and that's truly unfair for you. So I'm really sorry that this happened, and hopefully the next time you ride the bus and you have to sit in those seats because of your knee, that guy isn't there to try and ruin the party. And maybe next time just tell that guy to get lost. I mean, you don't have to move if you don't want to. You yourself know that you need that seat, and he's not about to put his hands on you to try and throw you out of the seat. So hopefully next time you can just ride the bus in peace, and hopefully you never get treated like that ever again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. I rejected my creepy coworker, stating to him that I would much rather be friends than go on a date, and now as a result, he has gotten progressively more weird, creepy, and incredibly rude. And despite reporting him to HR, he still has a job, and he still stalks me and does these really creepy things, and I honestly don't know what to do. So basically, I knew this guy in college. He always liked me, and the most I ever agreed to was to go out to coffee, which didn't even happen. We were okay friends, we spoke there and then, and sometimes we would play video games together, but I let him know that I wasn't interested in a relationship. Anyways, I planned to apply to this job I'm working at a while ago, before I even ended my program. I apply and I find out that this guy works there, which is fine for the most part. I messaged him and I told him that I'm applying, and he said, "Oh, that's cool." Eventually, I did get hired, and unfortunately, this is when he starts getting weird. He asked me out again and I rejected him, and I said that I would rather just be friends and all that good stuff. He then takes this horrendously. He was so convinced that we were going to be together, despite the fact that he barely knows me. I let him down as nice as I could, I swear. He's now gotten progressively worse. He spam messages me on all my social media, and I can deal with that for the most part. But then he started to add some of my friends on social media just to ask them about me. I said, "Please don't do that." And he says, "Oh, so I'm not allowed to make friends?" But at the end of the day, he doesn't even know the people that he's adding. He's only adding them so he can get more information about me. He also hacked my Teams application at work. Well, not really hacked, as he has an administrative access, but he went through all my messages and saw my manager speaking to me about the situation, and that's when he went off. The best part about it is that my manager only knows about the situation because this guy messaged her in a drunk rant about me. He has shown up to my house twice on 2 separate occasions and honked the horn like 100 times, each at about midnight. On these days, he can honestly probably spam call me about 200 times as well. He rage messaged me on our work teams, stalked me on my other social medias, and I had to block him on pretty much everything. He constantly rants about me on the Teams application and complains about me to our manager. She knows he's been stalking me too. And you know what? HR knows as well. And I don't want him to get fired, but I mean, what do I do? I've told them pretty much everything, except him showing up to my house. I'm saving that for if this escalates even further. He keeps making rude comments to me through the day about my work. I ask him to please stop, but he just gets worse. Here's the thing, I don't make any mistakes, but when I do, he literally spams me on my Teams app up until I open the message and makes sure to let me know that I did something wrong, and I've only been here like 2 months. He will literally make verbally aggressive side comments, knowing that I can hear him. I've explained to him that we're both adults, and this middle school behavior needs to stop, but he just denies doing anything. He literally acts like a child. For example, he messaged me on Friday asking if I was going to the work Christmas party and follows it up with, "If you're going, I'm not. I don't want anything to do with you inside or out of work." He deletes all his messages, so it just looks like I'm talking to myself too. It's honestly so unneeded. He will also just spam react to my messages and send the period punctuation over and over until I open his messages. And this is during work hours, mind you. If I don't reply, he has a hissy fit and threatens to talk to one of the managers about me. He will also walk past my desk about 20 times a day. He tries to see what I'm doing, and it annoys me so badly. He works to the other side of me and will literally walk all the way around to use the bathroom near me just to try and see what I'm doing. Once, I literally turned around and I saw him moving his head in a way to get a better look at my phone, despite the fact that I was on a lunch break. What more can I do? I'm extremely shy, so it's hard for me to stand up for myself, and he knows this. The verbal comments throughout the day and the spam messages are making me extremely anxious and uncomfortable. What should I do? I'm honestly surprised you have not gotten the police involved. If someone is showing up to my house and basically harassing me outside of work, then that's enough for me to be like, okay, I'm getting the cops involved. I'm gonna call the cops and say this guy is harassing me. It's also insane to me that he has not been fired yet. This is the definition of workplace harassment. This guy is going out of his way to bother you and to basically stalk you at work. And the fact that HR hasn't done anything about it is absolutely insane. I mean, are they asking for some kind of lawsuit against them? Because literally this is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to mitigate situations like this, because this one especially sounds really creepy. Here's the thing, it starts out with creepy text messages, as well as messages at work, as well as him basically obsessing over you all the time, and then it leads to something a lot more dangerous that can put your life in danger. So if I were you, I would start documenting everything that he's saying and present this to HR every time it happens, and I would get the police involved. I would say, this guy is harassing me and stalking me, and I don't know what to do in this situation, and I need help. I would also, if I was in your shoes, probably talk to an attorney. I mean, this is seriously crazy and creepy behavior, and I'm sure you're a nice person and you're shy, but you know what? It's just not worth your safety to try and be nice to this guy. He is a stalker, and this behavior is super dangerous. So you can report him to HR again and see if they can do anything about this, but if nothing is done inside the company about this, then getting the police involved and showing them exactly how this guy's acting might be your next best bet. And by the way, you've only worked there for 2 months, so quitting is definitely always an option. So whatever you decide to do, it's time to take some kind of action, because this is seriously scary behavior, and it's not something that I would take lightly. This next story is an update to a previous story we covered on the channel. In this story, the father had to deal with his son by the name of Jake, who stole the ring of his dead mother and tried to use it to propose to his now ex-girlfriend. Terrible things went down, the ring was eventually returned to the father, and Jake separated from his father and said that he would never talk to him again. Here's what the original poster had to say as an update. I was hoping for no more drama or anything of the like, but it just didn't stop. Yes, Jake sold his condo. For how much, I honestly don't know, but he probably made a profit flipping it. And last Saturday, he pretty much just took whatever he could fit into his car and left. As a side note, Jake had been saying he was going to do this for a while, just to try and get away from me, claiming that I basically had ruined his life. From what I know, the last few weeks have been hectic for my son. People all over town know exactly what he did, because the gossip train never stopped. At one point, Jake nearly got into a fight with a man at a bar, because this guy called him out in front of everyone there. I tried to take the initiative by going to see him one last time. I hoped that maybe we could talk things out and make amends before he left town, because at this point, I'd realized his moving away was the best thing he could do for himself. He had already destroyed his own reputation, and he's better off starting over somewhere else. house. But when I got there and knocked on his door, he refused to open it. I tried to say I only wanted to talk, and he told me through the door that there was nothing to talk about other than the fact that I ruined his life. There was a bit of a pause where he was only speaking intermittently. Then he suddenly went on a rant about the ring and how I should have just let Sarah keep it. Then went on to say that I should have also offered to help pay for the copy, but it didn't matter anymore. Sarah was confirmed crazy and they are through for good, just like he's through with me and his sister. After he said that got me angry, and I retorted that what he did was unacceptable. He assaulted his sister while stealing that ring from my house, for crying out loud, and he's honestly pretty lucky that he didn't get arrested for that. And literally everyone who knew what he did was against him. That's the kind of red flag that shows you are in the wrong on a citywide scale. Then I told him to drop the act that he's been putting up for the sake of his pride. I said that I don't know if he rushed things with Sarah because he missed his mother, or because he's now at the age that I was when he was born, or whatever other reason he could have. But the fact still remains that he knew what he did was wrong, and he just won't admit it. And I'm tired of trying to stick up for him. I didn't escalate the situation for anyone. He and Sarah did that themselves. I'm tired of being blamed for his own wrongdoings. That's the sort of thing narcissists and cowards do. His mother and I raised him better than that, and he should know that his mother would not have approved of his actions. But she's not here to say it. It doesn't matter who you are. If you steal something that's not yours, you can't then go blaming the person you stole it from for being mad about it and doing whatever they have to do in order to get it back. There was then a silent pause on Jake's end for a few seconds, and then he just said, "Screw you, Dad." After he said that, I could hear him crying and hitting things inside. And that's when I noticed down the hall that one of Jake's neighbors was poking her head out the door, and she went back inside the moment I looked at her. So I knew right then and there that this is going to end up back on the gossip train. Jake refused to say anything more to me, so I just left. But when I was leaving the building, a police car pulled up right in front of the condo building. Two officers got out of the car and asked my name. When I told them who I was, they said that they had been called by someone in the building saying I was trying to break into their apartment. I said I had an argument with my son through his door, but I didn't once try to force my way in, and I only touched the door to try and knock on it. I told the whole story of what happened, and then pointed out which neighbor had been watching and listening, and that the building had CCTV. One of the officers went up to talk to the neighbor, while the other detained me in handcuffs. He was very polite and said that the handcuffs were just to make sure, since they don't know who's telling the truth. I said he's just doing his job, and he let me sit on the bench nearby while we waited. The officer who went in the building called on the walkie-talkie after about 10 to 15 minutes of waiting. I'm not sure since I couldn't look at my watch, but he said that the neighbor's story more or less matched up with mine, and there was apparently more than one neighbor who was listening in who corroborated the same story. He then said he was going to talk to the building security and check the CCTV for that hallway. This took a fair bit longer, and again, I couldn't look at my watch. I just sat waiting on a bench near the entrance. But the kind officer pulled up a radio app on his cell phone and let me listen to it for a while to pass the time. The other officer finally came back on the walkie-talkie and told his partner to uncuff me because the CCTV had cleared me. He said that while the audio wasn't great, you could see and hear enough to show that I never once tried to force my way in. I was uncuffed, and after the other officer got back, the two of them briefly spoke to each other for a moment. Then, he actually asked me if I was the guy whose son stole his dead mother's ring. I confirmed that I am, and I asked him how did they know? They then said that they both heard about it through the grapevine, and after hearing my version of events, they put two and two together. One of them said he was in the office the day Sarah was arrested. Apparently, she was acting like a wild animal and was trying to bite at them, and she made several threats stating, "Do you know who my parents are?" as well as other horrible things. Eventually, the officer just told me to go home, and that I was probably better off not coming back. I nodded in agreement and I just left. I saw the police go back into the building as I was leaving, most likely to talk to Jake. I know it was him who called the police because his neighbors messaged me later on social media saying that the officers gave him a solid chewing out for wasting police time to the point where he was crying again. And I guess they also pointed out the ring incident and said that what he did was pretty low. I'm not sure how Jake handled that, but it sounds like he heavily embellished what was going on when he called the police. And from the time I first arrived to when the police got there, he had to have called them right around when we started talking through the door. He's beyond lucky that they didn't arrest him for calling them under false pretenses. I went home and I was comforted by my daughter Amber, and she told me I tried, and it's not my fault fault Jake has gone bad, but it still hurt. I may have lost my son permanently. I ended up just taking the day off of work and locking myself in the office to play some video games, just to try and unwind. My son left town over the weekend, and I may never see him again, but if I do, I hope he understands that I will always care about him. Yes, he wronged me, but I'm still his father. He could come to my door tomorrow wanting to talk, and I would let him in. I just hope that day doesn't take 10 or 20 years, but rather I hope it comes sooner. What a terrible situation all the way around. Because you're right, your son literally did this to himself, and he's too prideful to admit that he was in the wrong. And that's really unfortunate, because I really think a lot of his problems could probably be sorted out if he simply said, "I'm sorry," and tried to make amends. Instead, he's just doubling down because he's being prideful. And that's not fair for anybody involved, especially when you consider how much damage he caused not only to his family's name, but also to his own reputation. I mean, he basically threw his family under the bus and disowned his father in a way that's so inappropriate. And it all stems back to this decision to break into this guy's house and steal something that definitely wasn't his. I think if there was better communication involved, this all could have been avoided altogether. But instead, he's basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. And now he has to cut town just to try and have some kind of life again, which really sucks for him. But he did do this to himself. He stole this ring to try and use it to propose to his girlfriend, who most definitely would have taken it and run. And if that happened, that would have been absolutely tragic for everybody in the family, especially when you consider that this is the original poster's wife's ring, and this ring has been in her family for such a long time. What a waste to have that thrown down the drain, all because of the selfishness of this original poster's son. I mean, honestly, I think moving really would be the best option for him. He definitely ruined his reputation in that town. But even then, people have messed up bigger in other situations, and they're still able to make it work in the town that they live in. But I think the key ingredient here is humility, and it sounds like the original poster's son doesn't have any in his body. So I hope the original poster is able to get through this situation just fine, because they literally did everything they could to reach out to their son. But it's just unfortunate that they have decided to go in a different direction, despite your best efforts to try and make amends. An entitled Karen freaks out at me and threatens to sue me because I got her online order wrong for the grocery store I work at. And just as I'm trying to clock out for the day, she actually puts her hands on me and stops me from leaving the building, screaming at me that she's going to get me fired. And as a result, she got banned from my store, and I honestly am blown away by the way she acted. Here's what happened. So first, some context. I'm an 18-year-old male, and I work as a personal shopper at Safeway. If you don't know what that means, have you ever placed an order online? I'm the dude that goes around the store and fills it. It's an alright job, though every now and then, I have to deal with some crazy parent who has decided that I am personally at fault for everything bad to ever happen in their lives. And this family happened to have two of those types of people. A couple of weeks ago, I was filling someone's order as I usually do, and everything was going fine. It was a Thursday, meaning it got pretty slow around the afternoon. There was this one specialty artisan bread that the lady had ordered, which we had in stock, but for some reason it didn't scan properly. Stuff like this happens all the time. When that does happen, we substitute it in and move on to the next item. The problem was that this lady had selected no substitution in the app, which basically meant I had to override that in order to give her the bread that she wanted. Normally, we're not supposed to override the no sub rule if the customer specifies so. However, we have to make exceptions for code issues between the departments. If something doesn't scan properly, we just substitute it in for itself, if that makes sense. Either way, she was going to get the bread that she wanted at the same price, and all was supposed to be well. That is until about 30 minutes later, when I get a call on the store phone. I answer with my typical customer service greeting voice. "Thank you for calling Safeway. This is the original poster. How can I help you?" And this entitled Karen just goes absolutely nuts on me. She is full on screaming at me over the phone. She's saying, "I asked for no substitutions. Why did you substitute the bread, you idiot? I clearly specified do not substitute and you ignored it." And she just went on and on and on. When she was finally done shouting, I explained the whole situation to her, that the bakery used a barcode that didn't work, so I had to substitute it in to give her the bread. She would still be getting the bread she wanted at the price she would have normally paid. I've had to deal with similar situations a bunch, and normally they just say they understand and hang up, and it usually ends there. But in this case, she was not having it. She says, "I don't care. You still substituted it in, and I asked for no substitutions." So I explain it again to her, and guess what? She's still infuriated. She screams, "Let me talk to your manager. You clearly can't do your job. I want to talk to a manager right now." She then started screaming, "I'm a single mom with an autistic son. I can't come to the store and shop for myself. So I expect my orders not to be messed up like this. Is that too much to ask?" Now, as a side note, I understand the part about having an autistic son, by the way. I know that autism is different for everybody, but I have an autistic brother who needs to be watched by someone all the time, or else he'll do something very expensive, like breaking something or something along those lines. For example, last time he was left alone, I came back to a power outage, and that's all to say that yes, I know where this lady is coming from. It was like the more she spoke, the angrier she got. Before long, she was full on cussing me out and threatening me. Once she was done, she asked to talk to the manager for the 6th time. So I just say, okay, and I transfer her over to the manager. Not even a minute later, I see him come to me out of the office. According to him, she just said I should be fired and then immediately hung up. He asked me what I could have possibly said to make her so mad, and I explained the whole situation to him. Very rarely am I ever actually mad, and I'm never rude to people at work, so he totally believed me. He tells me to just go about my business while he figures out what he should do about the bread. And honestly, shout out to this guy. He is genuinely one of my favorite people. About 15 minutes later, and 15 minutes away from the end of my shift, I'm overall feeling pretty good. All the remaining orders for the day have been filled, and now I'm just waiting for them to be picked up or delivered. I'm signing out of the computer when a woman approaches me and grabs my shoulder. Now, I get there's no way she could have known this, but I hate being touched, so this was already kind of off-putting. I ask her how I can help her, and she asks me for my name. I tell her my name, and then she turns red with rage. It was at this moment that I realized it was the entitled Karen on the phone. She then starts screaming at me, so loud it drew the attention of pretty much everyone in the store. I was less worried about what she was saying, even though she was threatening violence and apparently legal action for some reason, but rather I was more so worried about how this looked to people around me. I'm a 6'5" lanky dude with a mustache, and I'm currently being shouted at by a short blonde lady threatening to sue me. The manager eventually gets involved, and he separates us. She goes up to the manager, demanding that I be fired for messing up her order, but instead he just asked her to get out. I wouldn't find out about this much later, but apparently at my store, touching an employee without their consent can get you banned. As far as I'm aware, the situation ended once she left the doors, though I later realized that if she had an autistic son that she couldn't leave unattended, why was she able to come to the store just to shout at me? I wouldn't be surprised if she really was just that neglectful. I'm not accusing her of lying by any means, but it did seem odd that her main reason for not being able to come to the store didn't matter anymore when she came to the store just to shout at someone and just to get herself banned. Either way, this entitled crazy Karen will never be a problem for me ever again. Talk about the biggest overreaction the world's ever seen. I mean, this lady's freaking out over bread. Like, what is going on? Like, it's one thing to be annoyed that a store changes things around, or maybe something gets swapped around, like, okay, whatever. But this lady was literally threatening violence, as well as a lawsuit against this poor hourly worker who is just trying to get their job done and go home. I mean, how crazy do you have to be to act like that? And worst of all, she was still going to get the bread that she wanted to. She's clearly an idiot, and she just did not know what she was talking about. So hopefully, for the sake of this original poster, this lady never comes back again, because she's clearly unhinged, and she most likely has been lying about her autistic son. I'll just go ahead and save for the original poster. Karens like this definitely like to make up stuff just to try and get on the pity side. That way they can try and have some kind of weird emotional manipulation over you. So maybe next time, if she wants to get her order correct at a grocery store, she should just go in and get it herself instead of screaming at some employee who's clearly just trying to do the best they can. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for wanting my sister to go to the doctor's office and get some medical care, all based on the way she's acting? Before I start, I would like to say that my parents aren't the best at scheduling medical help. For example, I had to get my friend's mom to reform my toenail as it was ingrown for 7 months, and they kept forgetting to put me on medication. Also, the reason that happened is that I have a birth defect where I had extra bones in one foot. Instead of buying meds for my toe, they were scared there wouldn't be enough acne medications. Now with that backstory out of the way, I'm 16 years old and I just finished school for the year. My sister is 10 years old and is too lazy to go anywhere vital and would prefer to go to an amusement park instead of to the doctor. Lately, my sister has been having a horrible cough, and it's one of those you know burns your your throat and are just horrible to have. She's barely been eating anything, a bite of a waffle or a bowl of fruit at best. I know it's still COVID time, but it's been well over a month. This is now a medical problem. She also has some mental problems that she is currently dealing with. If someone is to eat something in my family, she will scream at them, saying that they are being rude and disrespectful as it hurts her ears. Even if it's a drink, she yells loudly. My nanny has even said that she yells at her. I once came home at 10 o'clock at night from a volleyball tournament, and I hadn't had lunch because I had no money, and I had a piece of dried mango the entire time, and I just wanted dinner. Our living room and kitchen are basically one room too, by the way. My mom, my sister, and I are in these two rooms, and I made a pesto pasta and started eating at the kitchen table. My sister then yells from the couch in our living room, "Shut up, you're disgusting for eating that green gunk. Go stand in the pantry if you want to eat." My mom turns around and tells my sister that she can't hear me and that I'm closer to her than my sister, who's about 10 meters away. My sister then walks up to me, snatches away my food, and throws it out. "That will make you shut up." I couldn't move, nor could my mom. My sister just goes back to her iPad on the couch and stays there. This habit of hers started about 4 months ago, only happening rarely and quietly, but now it's every night or so. Also, to back this up, my mom sometimes talks and eats simultaneously. I never do this, and if I'm asked a question, I wait to finish chewing. My dad doesn't eat dinner with us because his schedule is so chaotic, but if we all go out, he's incredibly quiet. My nanny is big on table manners and has never eaten with her mouth open. She defended me during my sister's little rampages. My sister repeated this behavior so many times, even to our nanny who's 70 years old, to the point where both my nanny and I had to get my mom and start saying that she needs to go to a doctor. We had lists of reasons why that needs to happen. My nanny even told us about her friend's niece who refuses to eat in public or with others because of the sound of chewing. My mom looked at them and said, "But she doesn't really want to go. Don't worry, it's just a phase, she'll get through it," and then walked away. We have since brought this up several times because it's getting on my nanny's nerves. Honestly, it's getting on all of our nerves, and we just want her to go to the doctor, which she still won't do, and my mom won't schedule it for some reason. If you're asking why I can't schedule the appointment, I'm not a legal guardian, and I don't have enough accessible money to pay for an appointment. My nanny can't schedule it because she as well isn't a legal guardian and doesn't have her Medicare card. My parents have enough money to go to the doctor, and my mom has designer bags for crying out loud. Now, my sister has found out that we want to send her to a doctor, and she's just super angry with us. She yells at us that she's fine, but she's not, as she still complains 24/7. She still has a nasty cough, and she won't go to a doctor or get medical help. Of course, I can't tell if she just wants attention, but she can't keep this act up for long. I need my mom to get the doctor's appointment, but she doesn't want my sister uncomfortable with someone asking her questions. So it begs the question, am I the jerk for telling my mom that my sister needs to go to the doctors? Because at this point, I'm honestly not sure. I don't think you're a jerk in this situation. First off, the way that your sister is acting is super inappropriate, and it's crazy that your mom is letting this behavior just slip on by. She literally took the food out of your hands and threw it in the trash can, and then went right back to her iPad as if nothing happened. This weird controlling behavior needs to be stopped like right away. And she's had a cough for like a month. It sounds like your mom's being very neglectful, and that's not fair for anybody involved, especially your little sister. So honestly, some intervention of some kind might be for the best all around. And I don't think you're the jerk for voicing your concern. And sure, you and your nanny are absolutely annoyed by the way your sister's acting. It's inappropriate and it's very abrasive for literally no reason. I mean, people eat food all the time. You can't really live without it. And I'm sure that your little sister would be singing a different tune if you flipped the script and started screaming at her anytime she ate in front of you. Maybe that way you can give her a taste of her own medicine and show her just how ridiculous she's being. So hopefully this works out, and just know that you're not the jerk in this situation. You're just trying to help out your sister and your family, not to mention your own sanity in this situation. I'm married to my wife, but I possibly have feelings for another girl that I currently manage at my job. And after several text messages late at night, as well as phone calls with this female coworker, I'm confused about how I feel, and I don't know what to do. So I married my wife 3.5 years ago, and we have a 1-year-old daughter together, and I truly love them both. My wife is attractive, and I get told from the other guys that I'm lucky to have her. Last year, I was at a work Christmas party, and a girl I work with was being very flirtatious, and I was probably flirting back too. Anyways, nothing happened. But the days following that, my head was all over the place. I honestly think I dipped into a bit of a depression, but going to the gym and keeping myself active stopped that getting any worse. I felt like I had feelings for the girl and wasn't just the normal attraction to someone that you would normally feel. I had heart palpitations and my heart was racing constantly when I thought of her. I also couldn't get her out of my head. As the weeks and months went on, those feelings thankfully died down, but never fully went away. I'm now that female coworker's line manager, and we do still have a lot of banter together, and we clearly get along just fine. I do still find her attractive, obviously, but I felt nowhere near how I felt last year. That is until the work Christmas party came back around this year. I didn't really interact with her too much during the night, which I was surprised at myself, as I, along with everyone else, was pretty drunk. But we shared a few words and a few glances towards each other across the table, and then I received a message from her at 3 in the morning asking me where I was. I was still out in the club at this point, although I had separated from the group I was with, as they went to get some food. I messaged her back saying that we, meaning me and the others, had went back to our accommodation, and that was the end of the text interaction. Then in work the next day, she almost abruptly brings up that another colleague was alone, and that's why she was texting me at 3 in the morning. The thing is that I know that this other colleague went directly home from the club at about 2 in the morning. The girl also left the club at about 2:30 in the morning with some other people for food, which she slipped up and mentioned later on. And then after that, she went home. So I would say I'm about 80% sure that she was sending me a text message for more nefarious reasons, if you know what I mean. Either way, this has messed with my head again, and I can't stop thinking about this girl. I don't want to feel the way that I did last year, but also I'm worried that I have feelings for this girl. I genuinely don't know what to do, but I don't want to go through weeks feeling like rubbish simply because of this fairly minor interaction. All the cards are on the table. We've exchanged a few messages back and forth, initially work-related, but then a little bit of teasing, but she didn't respond to my last playful message. I don't want to have feelings for this girl, but I unfortunately feel like I may have some. Her look, her smile, etc., it just does something to me. People were speaking to me yesterday, and I couldn't even listen to what they were asking me because all I was doing was thinking about this. What should I do? This is absolutely inappropriate. So you're telling me that you're flirting with a younger coworker, all at the expense of your wife and your kid, and you're seriously trying to figure out what you should do? I don't know, maybe be loyal to your wife? This is so disrespectful to your wife and your relationship with her. By actively sending playful or teasing or flirting messages with this younger coworker, you're beginning to walk down a path where you're going to cheat on your wife. Like, this is how it starts. So if you want to keep your family, you need to stop. You need to stop all interactions with her, like right now. Tell her that you feel like you're crossing a professional boundary and you won't be replying to any messages or calls unless it has something to do with work. You seriously need to come back to reality and realize you're about to ruin everything in your life. Because here's the thing, you're married, you're not blind. It's human to find another person attractive in passing. You take note about it and then you carry on your day. But the fact that you're entertaining this woman and basically saying, ooh, what if I did send a flirty text message, is in no way, shape, or form going to be good for you and your current marriage. So honestly, get a hold of yourself. Also, for context, this guy is 31 years old and his female coworker is 24 years old. You are old enough to know better and to have some kind of head on your shoulders to protect your marriage and yourself from blowing up that marriage. So hopefully you're able to come to your senses sooner than later, because right now you're messing up big time. And if you're not careful, you're going to lose your wife, your kid, and possibly even your job for trying to pursue this younger coworker. Today, I messed up by telling my younger daughter that she had a feral sister who lived in a cage in the attic. And I'm here to tell you that was a massive mistake. First off, I want to say that this happened a few years ago. My wife travels a lot, which means that when my daughter was about 6 or 7 years old, the two of us would have lots of nights together where we would play games or read before bedtime. One time, we were sitting on her bed before sleep, and about halfway through a book, when I closed it, I said to her, "We really love you, honey. I'm so happy it worked out with you, not like the other one." She looked at me and said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, parenting is hard, and you don't get much practice, so sometimes you make mistakes. Take your sister, for instance. Before you, we had a young girl, and well, it just didn't work out. We were young, and we didn't know what we were doing, and it did not go well. My daughter just looks at me and asks, 'What happened to her?' I said, 'Well, we didn't really know what to do with her, so we just locked her in a cage in the attic and decided to start over. And we're lucky that we did, because that's how we got you.' I then opened up the book again and started reading, as if I hadn't just dropped a bombshell on her. Now, of course, my daughter had tons of questions, and I just made up all these facts about her supposed supposed sister by the name of Maggie. I said that she can't speak English and that she just kind of grunts and sings as a way of communicating. I also said that she is violent and we have to slide food to her with a stick. And we've also become worried lately because of some of her drawings. You know, fun stuff like that. My daughter knows I'm full of garbage, so she doesn't believe it, but kind of wants to know the truth for sure. So we come up with lots of cool stories about her sister who lives in the attic. Sometimes when we would read, I would stop and I would look at the ceiling and go, "Shush, did you hear that?" Probably nothing, before going back to the book. One time, she asked what she would do if she ever got out. Now, as a bit of context, the one thing I didn't tell you is that the door to the attic is in my daughter's room. So I told her, well, I said if she ever gets out, just lie still under your covers. She's not mad at you, she's mad at mommy and daddy. So a few weeks later, I'm working as a lunchroom monitor at her school. This is a volunteer thing that you do a few times a month, where you walk around the lunchroom and help little kids open their milk and stuff like that. My daughter is at a table with her friends and they call me over. One of the girls by the name of Colleen asked me straight up, "Molly says she has a sister who lives in a cage in the attic. Is this true?" Now this is where I messed up. What I should have said was, no, that's just a made up story. But what I did say is, I don't know, while smiling and shrugging, indicating that maybe there is a kid being held in a cage in our attic. And at the time, I didn't think much about it. A few days later, I come in from walking the dog, and my wife tells me the principal wants me to call her. Oh no, I think I know what this is about. My wife is like, oh, she probably just wants to talk about the ice cream fundraiser. And I'm just thinking to myself, no, that is not what she's planning on talking to me about. So I call and she says something to the effect of, "Hi, first, thank you so much for the ice cream social. We appreciate your help. So one of our students' parents called and said that she is worried because, oh, this is so silly, I know, that you are apparently keeping one of your kids in a cage in an attic. That's not true, right?" So now I have to go and explain in detail the whole story, which sounds like I'm a psychopath and the worst parent ever. She was very good about it and understanding, and we nervously laughed it off. The worst part of this was the girl who said something to her mom was a young girl whose mom had been to our house and someone we had driven different places. She knew us well and could have just called us instead of the principal, so that was pretty annoying. The outcome overall was a good one. We've since become very good friends with the principal as well as her husband, so overall it all kind of worked out in the end. That is actually quite hilarious. It reminds me of that one Simpsons episode where Bart had an evil twin living in the attic and they would feed him fish heads every night or something along those lines. Really fun stuff all around. But this also proves that kids really will take what you say in as truth. So next time, maybe be a little bit more careful with the stories that you tell them. An entitled Karen freaks out on me when I get a picture with Santa, claiming that because I don't believe in Christmas, I'm apparently gonna burn in hell. And I've honestly never laughed harder in my life. Here's what happened. So for some backstory, I'm 20 years old, I'm Jewish, and I work at a toy store at the local mall. So the get your photo with Santa thing is right in front of the toy store at the mall that I work at, which makes sense. Kids can look around while their parents wait in line, or the parents can look for present ideas while their kid waits in line, or they can wait as a family. There are a lot of options with it set up this way. So this incident happened at around 11 o'clock in the morning. I had been working at the toy store, and my boss lets me know I can go on break, so I end up doing just that. I had about 30 minutes, and I wasn't particularly hungry, but when I walked by the Santa exhibit, I saw that there was no lineup because it was a weekday in the middle of the day. Most kids are at school, and most of the parents are working. So, since I'm an adult and I don't celebrate Christmas, I thought a picture of me on Santa's lap would be a funny gift for my family on Hanukkah when I'm home. So I get in line. There's one family who currently has a kid seeing Santa, one kid in front of me, and not long after, our entitled mother, our entitled father, and their stupid children. They were all very lovely at first. We had a bit of a small talk while we waited. I asked their kids how excited they were to see Santa, as well as just some generic filler conversation questions. The family in front of me goes, and in hindsight, I think the gears were starting to turn in the mother's head that I wasn't just an older sibling, and I was actually there for myself. The family in front of me leaves. I get to tell Saint Nick exactly what I want for the holidays, even though I don't celebrate it, and I get my pictures. I go back to work and I clock back in, because even without the lineup, just waiting for two families and getting the pictures printed, as well as paid for, took most of my lunch break. And a few minutes later, the family from before comes in. The kids run off to go look at toys, and I give them a friendly hello again, but I am met with a very cold-hearted hello from the mother. Our store wasn't very busy either, given the time of day that it was. was, as well as the day in the week. So while they were browsing, I was showing my coworkers and the boss the pictures that I got just for a laugh. And right when that happened, the mom stomps over as if I had just spit in her figgy pudding. She goes, "I'm sorry. I just think it's very rude and immature to keep my kids waiting longer just for a joke." I said to her, "Ma'am, there was no wait, at least not to see Santa." She then responded in a snarky way by saying, "You're too old to believe in this crap." Keep in mind, her kids were the only kids in the store, and at this point, she was yelling at the top of her lungs. I say to her, "Ma'am, I don't celebrate Christmas. I don't even believe in it." And I say this a little bit quieter because I'm capable of being at least courteous towards her kids. The entitled father then chimes in and says,
"Well, that's a whole other reason why you shouldn't have been there. You're ruining it for everyone else."
I look at both of them and I say, "Well, it doesn't really matter. Santa says I'm on the nice list, and his word is law." I was very obviously just messing with them the whole time, which is a weird coping mechanism that I've got, where I try to escape conflict just by being funny. The entitled mom then looks at me and says,
"Well, God says you're gonna burn in hell, so you can just forget it."
And at this point, I was blown away, but I had the perfect comeback. I said, "Well, I'm Jewish. We don't have a hell." And it was right about at that moment my boss chimed in and said, "All right, I'm gonna need you to leave if you're gonna keep harassing my employee." The kids came back to find their parents, and one asked them if they could have one of the candy canes we have at our checkout counter. The entitled mom, of course, said no, and I said they were free, so you can just go ahead and take it. Both kids took a candy cane because free candy totally outweighs their mother's words, which is kind of a scary thought without the context. The mom stares daggers at me, called me a name that was really not appropriate for children to hear, but I just smirked and I said to them, "Merry Christmas!" My boss and coworkers are still laughing about it with me as I write this, and hopefully those two parents cheer up and find that joyful Christmas spirit. So this really is a funny story in my opinion. The fact that two parents actually would legitimately get upset because an adult is choosing to get a picture with Santa is really weird. This is honestly the first time I've ever seen anybody gatekeep Santa. I'm pretty sure he's the most accessible person on the planet, regardless of what religion you're a part of. But hey, apparently these two entitled parents definitely think otherwise. Hopefully they're able to find a better attitude towards Christmas, because before they know it, they're gonna ruin it for their kids, if you know what I mean. And I also like the fact that you can definitely tell these people are super entitled, because they know how to fake it when they're in line, but the second they see something that they just don't like, they're gonna run up to you and say, "Oh, you're gonna burn in hell." I mean, that's not very St. Nicholas of you, if you ask me. So hopefully the original poster never has to deal with that again, because I honestly think there's nothing wrong with getting a picture with Santa, regardless of your age. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for rejecting my ex-girlfriend after she came back to me after cheating on me, begging me for some kind of money? So to start things off, I'll go through a little bit of background with me and my ex-girlfriend. We met 3 years ago on a bus. She seemed nice and we talked for a while, and I ended up getting her number. We eventually started dating, and after about a year, she started to let slip her mask. She started yelling at me for little mistakes, like for example, forgetting the dishes or taking out the trash, and I will admit sometimes it was my fault. I got caught up on something else or something along those lines, but eventually it was everything I did. If I bought her a present, she would say, "Oh, you should have used that money for something else, not me. Stop being so irresponsible." But if I didn't buy her a present, she would say, "I can't believe you never get me anything. It's like you don't even love me." So it was a constant back and forth. Eventually, I went to surprise her at her apartment. I opened the door with my spare key because I wasn't planning on staying, as I was just dropping off a gift basket. I eventually then hear her and another guy going at it, if you know what I mean. At this point, I saw red, and I threw the door open and I started to yell at her. I asked how long this had been going on, and the guy responded, around a month. Sorry bro, she said she was single." And he walks into the bathroom to get dressed. She then starts wailing out excuses, and I honestly don't want to hear it. So I slam the door, I grab the gift basket, and I just drive home. When I get home, I cry my eyes out. My neighbor must have heard it because they knocked on my door just to see if I was okay. My neighbor is a good friend of mine, and she comforts me and calms me down. Eventually, a few months later, my neighbor Amber and I, we'll call her Sarah, that's not her real name, start dating and things are great. She is amazing and is always good to me, and I honestly adore her so much. Fast forward to today, and my ex knocks on my door, crying and asking to come in. I tell her no, and I try to close the door, but she actually stops me and asks me if we can get back together. I of course said no, and I tell her to just go away, but she says, well, at least give me some money because I deserve it. I ask her why on earth I would ever need to give her money. She responds by saying, because my boyfriend left me and I just got fired for too many late days. I asked her why she was late, and she explains that it's because she slept in after having many fun nights before. I tell her to go away because I honestly don't want to hear it, but she yells at me and cusses me out. My girlfriend says I did the right thing, but I'm worried if she actually did need some money and that I just yelled at somebody in need. I hate conflict and I try to help everyone I can as much as I can because I don't want people to suffer, but my ex was also a bad girlfriend and incredibly toxic. So it begs the question, am I the jerk for rejecting my ex and telling her to go away? I do not think you're the jerk in this situation. Legitimately, I think you really should listen to your girlfriend at this moment and believe what she says, that you did the right thing. People like your ex-girlfriend will always be looking for handouts. They'll cheat on you, they'll treat you like garbage, they'll yell at you about everything under the sun, but the second they can get any kind of cash or some kind of advantage out of you, you better believe that they will come back crawling and crying. They'll do whatever it takes to get that money in their hand. And honestly, you do not need that in your life because it sounds like you have an awesome girlfriend right now who loves you exactly the way you are and would never treat you like that. So personally, I would just cut that ex out of your life. Tell her to take a hike and never come back because it sounds like you have a better girlfriend in your life. And honestly, I would just hold fast to that and ignore your crazy, needy ex. I regret telling my coworker that I'm interested in him, and now I feel angry, broken, and very confused, and I don't know what to do. So a couple of weeks ago, I told a guy at my job that I was interested in him. He didn't reply in a negative or positive manner. He just said that he finds me attractive, and later, he added that he thinks I'm courageous for saying something like this. And before even saying all that, he admitted that he's been single for many years because of many heartbreaks, as well as some trust issues, and also that he's not really in the right place at the moment to have a relationship. The reason I decided to tell him I was interested is because he showed me so much signs of interest. He was flirting a lot with me, complimenting me intensely, saying he thinks I'm a beautiful woman, asking me indirectly if I'm single and stuff like that. I mean, all signs basically pointed to him constantly flirting with me, from the deep eye contact to him being very curious about me, as well as asking questions about my personal life. I mean, one day I even told him that there was something I wanted to tell him, but I didn't even know how to say it. And he replied by saying, whenever you're ready, just let me know. And then he actually winked at me. And before leaving for the day, he asked me, don't forget to tell me what you wanted to say, okay? And then winks again. I ended up just telling him I find him handsome, but it was like he was expecting me to say something else. I mean, the list honestly goes on. And what really upsets me the most is that when I asked him why he was flirting with me so much, after I admitted I was interested in him, he told me that he flirts with everyone. But I see how he treats other people. Yes, he is nice. And yes, he flirts and compliments people, but it's never as intense as the way I experience it. After that day, when I told him I was interested in him, he was still overly nice and flirty, and he was still touching me, mostly on my lower back and my arms. He was still talking a lot. He even mentioned while we were alone, so you like older men, huh? He winks at me again and he has a huge smile, which is very confusing. However, I did feel a bit awkward after I felt rejected. I'm still nice towards him and I talk to him. I smile as much as I can and I try to be polite, but I am less and less present, and I do talk less and less to him. I noticed also that he's kind of weird. A few days ago, he startled me after I opened the door, and he asked me, oh, I hope you don't think I'm ugly. Just kidding. But really, you were just in your bubble, right? Even today, he ate at the same time as me again, and decided to sit closer to me as usual. I engaged in a little bit of conversation with him, and we talked for a little bit, but he was silent the rest of the time, and usually he talks a lot. At some point, we were alone, but I felt like he really wanted to say something. He was silent and he just kind of seemed off. He just ended up asking me why I'm not eating and that I should eat more. So it begs the question, am I making him feel uncomfortable? I'm just really confused by his behavior and I honestly don't know what to do. First off, I always think it's a bad idea to try and ask somebody out that you work with. That is definitely not going to go well most of the time, and if anything, it's gonna cause weird situations like this. But on the other hand, this guy is definitely leading you on in my opinion. He's using the fact that you said, oh, you're really attractive, and decided to just kind of lean into it as some kind of joke. And that's not fair for you or your feelings. And if anything, you already have your answer about how he's gonna treat you, and you know for a fact that it will never be more than just some kind of work friendship. But with the way he's acting, I very seriously don't think it's gonna even be that far anymore. Also, this guy's winking at you after he says stuff. Sorry, but that's just a little creepy. That'd be acceptable if you're in a relationship. But for a colleague that you just turned down, no, that's really weird. So do yourself a favor and look for somebody else, because this guy's not interested, and if anything, it sounds like he's just trying to string you along, which honestly is completely unfair to you. Today, I messed up by realizing that my husband and I have been miscommunicating for years, and it's honestly pretty funny. So today, I was talking at lunch with my husband, and we went over the same subject we have unsuccessfully talked about for years. Please also note that we have known each other for almost 10 years, and we've lived together for 5, and we've been married for almost 3. So we were talking about dogs and cats, and he said that cats are pretty good. Now, pay attention to that wording, because that's the bit where we messed up. Over the years, I had been disheartened when he said things were pretty good. From my perspective, he seemed to be emotionally distant and unenthusiastic about things. Everything was just pretty good, and he said it in a very mild tone of voice. So over the years, we tried to talk about it with limited success. Today, when I asked him why he never seemed to show much enthusiasm for things, he was confused as always. He said that he did show enthusiasm because he likes cats, but I explained that he just said that they were only pretty good, and this confused him even more. But somehow, I managed upon the magic combination of words to get him to further elaborate. Usually, he would just repeat that things were pretty good, but today he managed to lay out his scale, and this is how it goes. It starts out as okay, and then it goes to good, then there's pretty good, and at the top of that list is the word great. Now, I have never seen pretty good used in that place in the scale. I always place it below good, as in almost good or mostly good. For years, we had been talking about things, and I was just always under the assumption that he just wasn't really interested in whatever it was. I had to run damage control at Thanksgiving dinner one time because he said my mom's cooking was pretty good. We have stopped watching TV shows because I thought he was only mildly enjoying them and didn't want to be too much of a bother. I eventually just came to the conclusion that he simply wasn't very expressive and tried to place his responses on my scale because he had such difficulty explaining it. And mind you, this has been going on for years. I also got disheartened when he said my dog was pretty good. He calls me pretty cool. When I told him about my scale, he was shocked. He says it must be a southern thing, though I don't really remember it when I lived in Texas. We compromised and said that it must be an Arkansas thing, which is his home state. We both began re-examining our interactions over the years. The Thanksgiving dinner, me explaining to my brother that no, my husband really did like that movie. He just expresses it in that way, especially how he talks about my dog, pretty much all of it. When lunch was over, I assured him everything was okay, and he said I was pretty cool and got this horrified look on his face. He realized that from my perspective, he had been calling me mostly good for years. I similarly realized I had been assuming he wasn't enthusiastic about things because of that wording. It was so embarrassing. I have since encouraged him to be more open about his feelings and his happiness, as well as just confusing him for years. I'm just so baffled by everything. It's good we're learning to communicate, but man, he feels really apologetic now, and I've tried to assure him that it's honestly okay. We're trying to find better ways to communicate, but you know what? It's kind of a process. He has also encouraged me to ask him what he really means when he says things, and this will hopefully be a good way of getting him to rephrase some of the things that he says. Hopefully we can cut down on miscommunications like this in the future. This is really a funny story. You think your partner feels one way and then they turn around and say, no, I actually really enjoy this. And also, if this is scaled from 1 to 4, this person's partner has scaled their relationship at a 3 out of 4, which is really good. Hopefully this works out for them, and hopefully they're able to communicate better, because I can honestly only assume what it's like to go literally years under the assumption that your partner really isn't that interested in just about anything. But in contrast, it must be relieving knowing that your partner is way more into you as well as the people around you than you previously realized. My sister is jealous of my friendship with her boyfriend, and now she thinks I'm trying to steal her boyfriend away from her, and I honestly don't don't know what to do. Okay, so my sister is dating her boyfriend for about 3 years. He's a good guy and I'm happy for them. She's a bit insecure about how she looks, but I don't know why, as she is so gorgeous, but she just doesn't see it. Her boyfriend loves her so much and is completely loyal to just her. I also get along really well with her boyfriend. We don't hang out or text on a daily basis, but we talk sometimes, and he's been texting me more often because of her Christmas present. We do those huge get-togethers at Christmas where all of our family, partners, and family friends are invited to my parents' house, and we just eat, drink, and play games all night long. And we have a group chat for planning purposes. My sister and her boyfriend are also in there, as well as other family members, friends of my parents, neighbors, and relatives. We all live pretty close by. I recently moved in with my best friend and got a new bed a few days ago. I couldn't get it upstairs on my own, mostly because there were some big boxes and it was far too heavy, so I texted in the group if anyone is close by to help me out. My sister's boyfriend, we'll call him Jake, that's not his real name, told me that he is in my area and will come over. He did, and he helped me to get it set up. It took maybe an hour in total, so I offered that he can have dinner with me as a thank you. I made a pizza, we ate and talked about the upcoming Christmas, and honestly nothing happened. We just talked as friends. He then left an hour later. Not soon after, my sister called me to accuse me of being into her boyfriend. She told me that I have enough guy friends, as well as guys that are into me, that could have helped me get stuff set up, but I just had to choose her boyfriend. Now, I have told her several times that I am simply not interested in Jake. I told her that there's nothing to worry about, but she didn't believe me and she just cussed me out. She then told me that I'm not allowed to come to the get-together. I talked to my parents and they are on my side and say that she is just overreacting. Now my sister says that she and Jake aren't coming if I come along. I tried to talk to her, as well as Jake too, but she's still super upset and blocked me on all social media, and I don't know what I did wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have invited him to stay, but he did me a favor, so I wanted to show my appreciation for his work, his time, and effort to help me out. And I honest to God would have done the same thing for anyone else who came along to help me with this. We just had dinner. I didn't invite him for anything else, if you know what I mean. She is apparently also mad at Jake, but not as much as she's mad at me. He just texted me stating that she thinks I'm into him and tried to steal him from her. But I'd never do that to her ever. She's my little sister and I would never hurt her. I'm at a loss at the moment because I want to resolve this issue before Christmas. I don't want us to make a fool out of ourselves for fighting over something so stupid right before the holidays. What should I do? The way your sister is acting is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that has to be some serious insecurity for her to start acting like that. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. You literally just had dinner with her boyfriend, and that was just as a thank you for him coming out to help out. There are a few options here, but I think if anything, just explain to her that, hey, maybe I'm just trying to have a brother-in-law type relationship with him and nothing more. It's really unfortunate that your sibling feels this way, so maybe even also talking to the boyfriend and saying, hey, can you try and reel this in and explain to her that you are not interested in me? That might be a good way of trying to get through to her and explain to her that no, nothing is going on. Nothing happened and there's literally nothing to worry about. So hopefully that conversation goes well, because you're right, it is literally right before Christmas, and it really would be stupid to argue over something so small this close to the holidays. An entitled, spoiled, rotten child treats me like garbage at my work, but after this kid starts crying because I simply corrected him, this kid's entitled parents then demand that I apologize, but I simply refused to do so, and instead flipped the script and told them basically in a roundabout way that they are awful parents. Here's what happened. So this happened earlier this year when I used to work at a kids cafe. Think indoor playground with a coffee kiosk for rich people. Basically on weekdays, we would have hour-long programs. It would be 30 minutes of an activity, such as story time, crafting, board games, stuff like that, as well as 30 minutes of playtime in the playground. On the weekends, we would do a 2-hour-long themed camp program, where we would only do activities for the full 2 hours, no playing on the playground. At work, I would always look busy when parents come to drop off kids or pick up kids. We are supposed to cheerfully greet kids as they come in, then give parents feedback on how their kid did when they leave. But the thing about giving feedback, we have to lie. We are not allowed to say anything negative about the kid's behavior. So needless to say, I generally avoided speaking to the parents because because I honestly don't care, and I think parents should know the truth. But I also wanted to keep my job and not get reprimanded for breaking a company rule. One Saturday, I was in charge of leading a camp. For camp, we had scripts that we should follow. It was the very end of the camp, and all the parents were waiting outside to pick up their kids. The cafe is located in a shopping mall, and our supposed walls were giant glass panels, so everyone could see into the cafe. We were doing the last activity, which was to, quote, save the cute forest animals from a fire. The kids would take turns being a firefighter and run up and choose one animal to save, then bring it back and put it in the basket. I was sitting holding the basket with one hand and the script in the other, and two kids were left. I told one kid who's 8 years old to run up and save one of the animals. He grabbed two animals, so I told him, no, only one animal please. He then rolled his eyes and tossed the other animal to the side. He finally came down and put his animal in the basket. He asked to go again, and I told him that he could not do that because we had one more person to go who hadn't had a chance to get the animal, and it was almost time to go home anyways. He pouted and smacked the script out of my hand. He then laughed incredibly loudly, and it was honestly very annoying. I grabbed his hand and I told him to pick up the script and give it to me nicely, which he did. And I proceeded to tell him that his behavior was not nice and that now I wanted him to go sit down. At that point, he started crying and he sat down. I continued with the activity while he kept crying. My coworkers tried to comfort him, but he would ignore them and throw the candy that they offered him. So my manager came to me and told me to apologize to him for making him cry. I told her I didn't do anything to make him cry. He is just spoiled. The manager walked away, so I started to clean up the activity area. The manager came back and told me that this kid's parents were upset that I made their kid cry, and they demanded that I apologize. I look over and I see the entitled parents comforting their stupid child, so I loudly asked if they witnessed this kid's behavior. My manager said yes, but I was at fault for not comforting this stupid kid after reprimanding him. I loudly, especially so the entitled parents could hear, told her that I did not reprimand this kid. I told him to give me the script, and I told him that what he did was not nice. The entitled parents called over my manager and told my manager they would not be coming back to a facility with cruel employees that would bully a kid like that. They threatened to leave a bad review. My manager apologized so many times. These entitled parents told her that they would only accept an apology from me to them, as well as to their stupid kid. And when they said that, I refused. And I told these entitled parents that maybe if their child had some manners, we wouldn't be where we are right now. The entitled mother was very upset by what I said, but the entitled dad didn't say much. They grabbed their things and they just left. My manager told me that I should know better and that I need to read up on the company's policies and rules about how to deal with parents. The very next weekend, that same stupid kid came back and talked to me like nothing ever happened. And you know what? So did I. I don't like holding grudges against kids, but the entitled parents, on the other hand, asked the manager to ask me if I have something against this kid. So again, I said loud enough for these stupid parents to hear, kids can't teach themselves manners or how to behave properly. The parents need to do that. So of course I don't have a problem with this kid. The entitled parents just looked at each other and left before my manager could approach them. I didn't have any problems with the kid that day, but I did hear from my coworkers that the two parents asked the manager what days I didn't work just so they could bring their stupid kid in while I was not there. This is such a hilarious story to me because you can tell the original poster literally does not care if they get fired. They are legitimately almost welcoming it at this point. Like they basically said, oh, you want to fire me? You want to say I'm not following company rules? Okay, let me talk a little bit louder. And you know what? The fact that these parents are not jumping in and being like, no, my kid's an angel, they would never do that, for me is probably proof that they know exactly what this person's talking about, and they know for a fact that their spoiled, rotten child has absolutely no manners, and they did nothing to have any kind of positive patterns in this kid's life. And what kind of company would encourage your employees to lie to the parents? Like if I was a parent and my kid was acting up, I would absolutely want to know if my kid went goblin mode and did something absolutely heinous. Like my kid's gonna be punished if they acted up like that. There's no excuse. So good for the original poster for putting their foot down. Clearly, I think the manager knows that they're in the right, and hopefully some policy changes can come around that will fix this weird rule that you've got to lie to parents about their stupid kid, especially if that kid was acting up and being completely obnoxious. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the link links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for ghosting a former coworker of mine who was looking for a positive reference, but definitely did not leave his previous job in a good way? Here's what happened. So I work at a major university in the United States. I run a maintenance crew at night, and there's another shop who also works at night. We are in the same building, but focus on different kinds of work. Our shops get along great, and we usually help each other out on a regular basis. About 5 years ago, the other shop had an employee by the name of Bob. Bob was a really nice guy, but he was a physical manifestation of Pigpen from Peanuts. He was always dirty, he had torn clothing, he smelled terrible, and I won't even go into his dental hygiene. It was bad enough that his supervisor had to have a very uncomfortable discussion with him about using soap while washing and using deodorant. He made me uncomfortable more than a few times by alluding to his personal life with his wife, if you know what I mean. He wasn't explicit, but just thinking about how dirty he was made the mental image absolutely nauseating. Yuck. Well, he worked for this other shop for a few years when his marriage started having problems. As he put it, his wife was cheating on him with some previous boyfriends. Apparently, this wasn't the first time it happened, but he didn't want to divorce her since they had young kids, and he loved her so much. Well, he decided to deal with this situation in a way that basically got him fired. He had already been having some performance issues, and his supervisor really wanted to get rid of him. Unfortunately, at our university, getting fired is pretty hard to do. You have to get a warning, both informal and formal, multiple times, and then they can eventually let you go. It's a long, drawn-out process that frankly a lot of supervisors don't care to do. Therefore, there are lots of toxic employees that get away with terrible things. Anywhere else, they'd be gone in no time, but here, they have a lot of protection. There are ways to skip the line though. Obviously, bad things like violence or other harassment or even stealing can either get you fired right away or go straight to a final warning. If you screw up again after a final warning, you're done. Bob found himself in a very unique situation where he was able to skip the line. One day, his supervisor checked his work phone. As a fun fact, he is not entitled to privacy when he's using university phones or their computers. And the supervisor very quickly found some disturbing information. He called HR and they put together a fact-finding. This is a small group of people who investigate complaints or claims of bad behavior to figure out what happened. A lot of the times, it boils down to a he said, she said situation, and things are hard to prove. However, Bob provided all the proof they would ever need. Bob's supervisor discovered he downloaded some scandalous photos on his company phone with links to dating sites and history to Craigslist personal ads. They also found that he had linked his personal email to his phone and found emails of him setting up his rendezvous. He was doing all of this at work and even had his rendezvous at work, if you know what I mean, often in a company vehicle. The most surprising part was that he was meeting up with people while he was married to his wife. Eventually, when confronted about these facts, Bob confessed everything during the fact-finding. I wasn't even there, but the other supervisor confided in me afterwards. He said it was the most uncomfortable conversation he's ever had. Apparently, once Bob started talking, he just didn't stop. He willingly divulged all these details about him meeting up with people and basically cheating on his wife. After the meeting, HR needed some time to process everything, but the general consensus was that he would be fired. He was pulled aside by one of his coworkers, and they advised him to quit before he was fired. He did and was gone a few days later. I felt really sorry for him about his situation. I told him that if he needed a reference, that I would be happy to provide one, since obviously his supervisor couldn't honestly give him a good one. He thanked me and was gone shortly after that. A few weeks later, I started seeing emails for references for him come in. I didn't give him glowing references, but I gave him positive ones based on the work I saw him do. Since I technically wasn't supposed to know about the circumstances of his departure, I left that part out of my reference. I was trying to help him out, and that was a mistake. I'm not sure if it was his hygiene or what, but this guy either couldn't get a job or kept getting let go because I got a reference check after reference check. In total, I probably did 30 over 3 years. At first, it was him applying for other government agencies. Our university is technically a state agency. And then it focused on custodial jobs at churches and offices. Then he finally settled on what he wanted to do, working in the public school environment. But this is where I started to get uncomfortable, because based on his history of having rendezvous at his previous job, I thought him working at a public school really would be a bad idea. He started applying in areas where he lived, but started reaching further and further out in desperation for a job. I gave him references, but they were very neutral at best. Eventually, he got to my kid's school district. Bear in mind, he lives about 100 miles away from my school district, so he really was reaching. In almost 3 years of searching, no one was hiring him, so he eventually just got all the way up to me, and something in me just snapped. I gave him the single most negative reference I have ever given anyone, and I told them flatly not to hire him. I didn't go into specifics, but it was strong enough that there would be no way they would hire him. After that, I decided to ghost any of his reference requests. After about 6 or 7 ghostings, he finally stopped using me. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't you just talk to Bob and say that you don't think it would be a good idea for him to work at a school? But honestly, that is a conversation that I really didn't want to have. There is no way that I could have had that conversation without letting him know that I knew about the circumstances of his departure and basically accusing him of being a nefarious individual, if you know what I mean. There was no chance of that going well. It still shocks me that anyone could actively search for a job, any job, and could strike out for 3 years straight. I mean, if anything, just go to McDonald's or Costco. Become a sanitation worker so you don't have to worry about smelling at work. But overall, this begs the question, was I the jerk for giving up on him and ghosting his reference checks, considering all the information that I knew? I don't think you're the jerk at all in this situation. This guy clearly did not have it all together in his life, and honestly, all the problems he has legitimately is his own fault. So I would not feel guilty at all for ghosting his reference checks and for deciding, you know what, I just don't want to be a part of this. Because I know if I was in your shoes, I probably would have done the same thing. Today, I messed up by taking a shower at work. So to start things out, this actually happened this morning. After a 20-minute bicycle ride through the freezing Scandinavian winter, I arrived at work and figured it would be a good idea to take a warm and refreshing shower. Luckily, my workplace has some nice big bathrooms with shower facilities. I immediately head into the bathroom, drop my clothes on the floor, and step into the shower and relax for a good 10 to 15 minutes. After finally snapping out of my catatonic shower state, I draw back the curtains and I step out onto the overflowing bathroom floor. And by flooded, I mean that we probably had a good half-inch of water covering the entirety of the bathroom floor. I look over to the corner where my pile of clothes are simulating a cotton island, and they are completely saturated by water. So here I am, butt naked in the bathroom at my work with no dry clothes. My first thought was just to put it back on and hurry back home to change. But being soaking wet in sub-zero temperature could lead to severe pneumonia under the best conditions. The second option was to make a complete power move and walk out just wearing a towel and hope I could do a series of speech 100 skill checks to gaslight everyone else into thinking they were the weird ones and for them to hand over some clothes to me. Luckily, I had a third option. By a stroke of pure luck, I had placed my towel and my private cell phone on the sink, thus unscathed by the water. I frantically Googled my work to see if I could find the number of my boss, and thankfully I was successful. Now I just had to muster up the courage to call her and explain the situation and see if she could save me. It is also worth noting here that my boss is a lady in her early 30s, so it was of some importance to me that this would not come off as a ploy for some nefarious activity, if you know what I mean. Luckily, she had a good laugh about it, said I was a complete idiot, and found an old soccer shirt in the break room and dropped it in front of the bathroom. That solved some of my problem, but left me with the bottom half unaccounted for. At this point, however, I had spent the last 10 to 15 minutes twisting my jeans and running them under the hand dryer, so they had reached a state of acceptable humidity under the circumstances. At this point, it was about as good as it was going to get, so I went commando into the jeans and put on the soccer shirt and brought the rest of my clothes to a drying cabinet. At this point, I had no option but to get back to work while waiting for my blue-collar suit to dry up and just embrace the humiliation and the questions from my colleagues about why I was dressed like I was going to a festival. Knowing there was no way to stop the rumors from spreading, I figured I just might as well embrace the situation and get a good laugh with everyone else. This is honestly hilarious. You go to work just to try and get a shower to try and get some kind of warmth on your body, and then you find out you basically flooded the bathroom. Also, as a side note, I'm incredibly jealous that the original poster's work had a shower that worked. When I lived in colder climates, it would have been nice to take a quick shower and then get to work. But overall, this is just a really funny story, and hopefully the next time you decide to take a shower at work, you put your clothes on the countertop instead of the floor. My father framed me for years for his cheating, and I'm only just finding out the details now, and I'm honestly disgusted. So I'm moving out right now. I'm going to live with a friend of mine and hopefully never see my family ever again. For years, I've lived in an abusive environment without ever talking about this, not even to my biological mother. She was the only person I could reach out to, but lives far away and is happy. So I didn't want to burst into her life again after what my father did to her. I have been living with the burden of being a disgusting human being and deserving all that happened to me, that I didn't even consider it as abuse, but more like a well-deserved punishment. Only recently did I open up about a small issue anonymously online, and I think I'm addicted to it. I want to share more and more. No one will know it's me, so I spill all the tea without worry. To get to the point, I was accused of helping my father hide the fact that he was cheating on his new wife. It is quite comedic, but it's also so hard to prove that it wasn't like that at all. How can I prove this when his wife was participating in framing me? All that to seem like a good, respectable woman to her family, and not to admit that they were in an open relationship. I can't believe how stupid I've been for years now, blaming myself for what happened. Looking back now, I think I'll never recover from what happened, but I didn't even realize it was happening. My father used me like a scapegoat. No, even better, he used me as a punching bag, and it was all planned. My stepmother pretended to be my victim, and my stepbrother was her willing accomplice. Honestly, they could have all taken me out in my sleep, and it would have been a lot more merciful than what I went through. For years, I thought I had betrayed them and hurt them, but I was just their toy. I can't explain the level of acting they displayed. I don't think anyone would ever believe me either. Maybe I'm just insane. Honestly, I don't even know, because they guilt-tripped me into never seeking therapy and mental help. I regret not clinging to my mother and begging her to take me away from there when I was just a kid. I regret every single day I lived in their house. I think I need to explain it better. I don't think anyone will understand anything from the rant I've been on, but basically, my mother and father were married when he told me, a 9-year-old boy, that I had a brother and asked me to keep it a secret. He took me to my stepmother's house to meet him and build a relationship with them. I went home, I told my mother, because I didn't feel like hiding anything from her. My mother then confronted him, and when she found out, she was devastated. So she left him and never let him contact her again. My father literally blamed me and said that I broke our family. He kept doing it, pushing me or hitting me and giving me glares until my stepmother moved in with my stepbrother. I was a kid back then and never told anyone what happened, so I have no proof, but I remember, and I swear I remember all that. Honestly, I wish I was left with a scar or something, but no, I have nothing to prove anything I say. Nothing, no evidence, nothing I wish I could have shared with the world. When I was a teenager, around 15 years old, he took me out for some father-son time and separately took my stepbrother out too. When he was with me, he took me to see a lady of the night, and he had some fun, if you know what I mean, in the other room, while I was in the other room, trying to ignore everything. He took my stepbrother to movies and to the park while I was there, having my sanity stolen from me. He told me not to say anything to my stepmother, and I know how pathetic it sounds, but I was scared of him. Just a glance and I was like an obedient dog. He said that if I didn't want to destroy this family too, then I better keep my mouth shut. And for a long time, I tried to force myself to tell my stepmother. I was waiting for him not to be home and to just tell her, but I was a coward, and I didn't say anything because I was scared of what would happen if this woman left him too. She soon found out when I was 15 or 16 years old, and that's when she started treating me terribly as well. She would do things constantly to basically make it feel like I was unwelcome in that home. She made my stepbrother hate me when I really loved him more than anyone. I really was close to him, and he was my only happiness, and he also became my abuser. Even my grandparents never bought any gifts for me. They would just glare at me as well, and they never spoke to me normally ever. But the reality of the situation was that her sister somehow found out that he was seeing other women and told their parents. Not to look bad in front of a traditional family, they made up the excuse that it happened only a few times and tried to wrap me up in this as an excuse, stating that I helped my father cover up the whole thing. And it's honestly all so disturbing. I only realize now, after all the mess and the self-blame that they never argued about, their relationship was affected, and until this day, they preserve that innocent facade in front of everybody, while I live surrounded by people who hate me. I always thought it was unfair for my father to be so easily forgiven, while I was still preserved, and it only clicked now, when I realized they were both in an open relationship, and pretty much everybody knew it. My father never protected me, and he honestly never cared. And hopefully I never see these people ever again. Your family sounds awful, but I really want you to know that it's never too late to go into therapy. And based on what you're talking about, I think that really could do a lot for you. You've been through a lot, your family has been awful to you, but you can't start anew. So hopefully moving out to be with your friends will hopefully be a good change in your life. An entitled Karen gets up in my face and screams at me to sit down at a concert, but I simply wasn't going to take it, so I snapped back at her just as hard and told her to shut up and mind her own business. And I've never been more nervous in my life. Here's what happened. So earlier this month, a friend who I will call Danger, that's obviously not their real name, texted me last minute saying he had 2 extra tickets for a Rick Springfield concert that night. When I say last minute, I mean he texted me at 6:45 and the show started at 8 o'clock. And I live a little under an hour away from the venue, but I had nothing to do, so off my mom and I went. Skip forward to the show itself. I'm vibing, having a good time, just enjoying some live music on a night I didn't expect to. But in between songs, this couple behind me is constantly yelling, and not the kind of yelling you expect at a concert, saying stuff like, "Sit down, down in front," stuff along those lines. Most of the yelling came from our main antagonist, the entitled Karen of this story. Both of these two were sitting down, which I get it. You're at a show where you have seats, so you are obviously taking advantage of that. But yelling at others to sit down because you can't see, whatever, I'm just gonna enjoy the music. Then it actually happened. This entitled Karen actually poked me. I assumed that one of the people behind me just bumped into me, so at first I just ignored it. But then I felt another poke, and that one was harder and obviously intentional. Seeing as it was right in the middle of my back, I turn and I'm face to face with this entitled Karen. "Could you sit down?" she demands as she points at my chair. Now, me being the nice person that I try to be, I happily oblige. I know what it's like not being able to see at shows. I mean, I could barely see Springfield on stage at the moment too. Plus, there were 2 giant screens projecting the show for people to see, so I could just watch those. Well, this wasn't good enough. This entitled Karen then screams, "Sit down." This went on during the breaks between 4 more songs. My mom kept noticing my building frustration and tried to calm me down. I texted Danger about this to relieve some stress and see what he would say. He was in a different section than me because he was planning to get a meet and greet. But I honestly couldn't take it. I just wanted to have a good time, and it was being ruined by this entitled Karen. This entitled Karen then shouted one more time, "You need to sit down." And at that point, I was tired of being talked to like this, and I snapped at this lady in a way that I honestly never expected. I whipped my head around and I said, "Oh my God, will you shut up? We're trying to listen to the music." She screamed back at me by saying, "Well, I can't see." But I said, "Neither can I, lady. I can't see when I'm standing or sitting. There's a screen there and there. You can watch those. You can stand up or you can sit down and just enjoy it. We are here to listen to music and have a good time. Stop complaining and just relax, you Karen." This entitled Karen then just grumbled and said, "Whatever, and my name's not Karen." I eventually stood right back up and went back to having a good time, and there was no more yelling from behind. My heart was racing for a while after that. The thing you gotta know about me is I have really bad anxiety, so bad that my clinical diagnosis is agoraphobia. I have gotten a lot better, and music is something that has helped me with that, but never in my wildest dreams would I think I would snap at a Karen like this, especially without at least a shot of alcohol in my system. But I was sober, so that was intense for me. But here is where things get really interesting. A few songs later, I feel a gentle squeeze on my shoulder. Internally, I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go again. And I turn around to see this entitled Karen. She looks at me and says, "I love the way you move." She's giggling at this point, referring to me bouncing to the music. I look at her and I say, "Thank you?" replying obviously very confused. "Sorry about before. It's just so hard to see. Like that guy up there is like 7 feet tall." She said that referring to a man built like a tree a few rows up. I look at her and I say, "Oh, it's okay, I get it. I'm only 5 foot, so I can never see as well. We're just here to vibe and and have fun. She then asks me and says, "What the heck is a Karen anyways?" Her question made me giggle nervously, prompting her to comment, "Oh, I love your giggle. That's so adorable." For the rest of the night, all was well. I had a blast. The Karen wasn't a Karen anymore. She would keep making little comments and apologizing as time went on. When Rick Springfield came into the crowd for one song, she kept nudging me and exclaiming, "Go up there." When it came time for the song Jesse's Girl at the end, she gave me a pat on the shoulder and said, "I'm gonna go up front," and I didn't see her again. Overall, it was a very interesting experience, but dear God, I don't ever want to have that experience of snapping at a Karen again. My stress levels were through the roof for days. As a side note, at the end of the night, Danger finally responded to my text message about the entitled Karen poking me in the back. His response, "Dude, absolutely destroy her." He has gotten very protective of me since he started calling me his little sister. So while I find that funny, I'm not at all surprised that's how he responded. What a weird situation. It's pretty obvious to me that she clearly had one too many drinks and suddenly she became super giggly all of a sudden, complimenting the person that was very clearly blocking their view. Overall, I think it kind of worked out in the end, and I'm right there with the original poster. I definitely don't like conflict in this way, but sometimes people push it way too far, and this entitled Karen definitely did just that. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My horrible cousin, who has been abusive towards me for several years, asked me out of nowhere in front of the entire family if I would be her maid of honor. But after all that I've endured for almost a decade of dealing with her, I turned this moment against her and I turned her down by saying no, saying that I would rather be just about anywhere than watching two clowns get married. And as a result, she's never gonna talk to me again, and I couldn't be happier. Here's what happened. So I have a cousin with whom I had a remarkably close relationship to the point that we were like sisters. That all changed when she was responsible for incidents that to this day made me reconsider our cousin-sister relationship. In 2012, when I was 16 years old, she gave me a strong relaxer that caused me to cut off 14 inches of my hair. For context, I used to relax my hair, and it was always soft or regular since I have fine hair. Her reasons? Because she started dating my ex, and he would not stop talking about my hair or my natural beauty. She stole friends from me and possible boyfriends from me. She turned family members against me, would rub in my face that she was my grandmother's favorite, and made fun of me for going back to my curly hair, all while mocking me for losing my older brother and sleep with my ex while on the process of moving together. She even made a post on Facebook mocking me for giving birth to my now passed away baby while 7 months pregnant. She also left threatening notes and a voodoo doll on my car. If you haven't caught on, she's not a very good person. I can keep going, but I don't want to make this any longer by explaining how messed up she is. At one point, I tried to get a restraining order on her, but the police thought I did not have enough evidence. I had texts of her admitting to doing it, but it was not enough. Or as one police officer told me, it could be faked. So I blocked her from all my social media and blocked her number, and the only times I would only see her were at family gatherings. But I would avoid her since I did not want her situation in my life, or I would avoid her to not have my mental health triggered by her. So in June, she got engaged to my ex, and I found out from my family members. For context, I found them together, and instead of screaming and crying, I laughed and told them to enjoy my sloppy seconds. So my aunt was celebrating her anniversary with a barbecue, meaning I would see her. I went and I was having an enjoyable time, but when at the table, one of my aunts asked her how the wedding planning was going, and she could not help but brag that it was good. And now she had an announcement, and she looked at me with a devilish smile. She asked me in front of everyone if I wanted to be her maid of honor, since thanks to me, they both met up. I was cold, and I told her no, and when I said that, she whined about it and said, "Why not?" And all I gave her was a look, and she actually said that it's time for me to put effort into fixing our sister-cousin relationship. I just laughed when she said that, and told her that by the time she is having her wedding, I would be in college finals, and after that, a month-long trip for my anniversary, and that would be better than seeing two clowns getting married. Plus, I told her the reasons I said no. She then started crying and yelled that if I do not not do this, that I'm not invited to the wedding. But I just looked at her and I coldly said, fine by me, and I walked away, leaving her with a surprised Pikachu face. I have not spoken to her since that day, but all my family members support me, since they all saw how much of a horrible person she has been over the years. Good for the original poster for sticking up for themselves. There's nothing worse than having a family member who not only took advantage of you multiple times, but also mocked, ridiculed, and humiliated you multiple times, getting exactly what they deserve. And this lady definitely fits the bill. She is toxic, she was abusive towards you when you were teenagers, and she's clearly trying to manipulate you just as one last rub of salt in the wound. That yes, she's getting with your ex-boyfriend and they're getting married. I mean, you would have been nuts to say yes to being her maid of honor. And let's talk about that cousin-sister relationship real quick. I think it's comical how she's leaving it on the original poster to try and fix that situation, when in reality, she's the one that did this to this relationship in the first place. It's honestly so toxic, and I really would not be surprised if this cousin is actually some kind of narcissist, because all the things that's being described definitely points to that being it. So hopefully the original poster is doing good with this decision, and they know that they made the right decision, because their cousin is crazy, and if I was in their shoes, I absolutely would have done the exact same thing. My job is super toxic, and it has managers who don't help out around the restaurant, and they all basically just bark orders and sit on their butts and do nothing all day. And things are not getting better, and I don't know whether I should quit or not, or if I should just get into something else. And I don't know what to do. Okay, so I've been serving for a while. I took a break for a couple of years, and now I'm back to it. I've been doing okay making great money, and had tons of tables compliment me. Had one find my manager and let her know I provided the best service that they've received in years. So like, yeah, I must be doing pretty good, right? My issue lies with management, mostly the shift leads. They're incredibly gossipy and very rude. I don't particularly care about the gossip, and I let them do whatever they want. Management doesn't do a lot at our restaurant. They don't run food unless there's some kind of allergy stipulation, and if asked to do something to help, they often roll their eyes, so I just avoid asking them unless absolutely necessary. One night, the bar was behind, and my appetizer came out before my drink. I asked the shift lead near the bar if there was anything that could be done about this, as we normally comp drinks or apps if this happens. She told me that the bar's behind and to just deal with it, essentially telling me to go pound some sand. Later, when I got a second, as the entire night was nuts, I asked the manager if there was anything we could do before their bill came. She said unfortunately no, because it had been too long, so she couldn't look up the drink times. She then asked me why I never asked them sooner, and I said actually I did, but was told that the bar was behind and to just deal with it. She asked who told me this, and I reluctantly told her the name of the shift lead. I overheard from others later that she was mad because I almost got her in trouble. The next day, I was unpacking all new shipments, as I was opening on a day we receive orders. Then I had to reset the entire dining side of the restaurant in 15 minutes after the fact. I was taking a longer while than expected, and so a different shift lead who was on her laptop all morning came next to me, started clapping, and started saying,
"Chop chop, hurry up."
I'm not sure if I took it personally, but I find it incredibly rude, considering she was just sitting in the booth while I was struggling. And maybe this is just the culture of management to not really do much of anything. After this, my shifts were cut, and it's really hard not to take this personally. We've received poor reviews on Google for individuals sitting close to the kitchen, stating that they are hearing people say, "That's not my job," especially from managers when they are asked to run the food. So the customers definitely are in the know, and they hear what's going on. So I'm at a point where I'm wondering, do I leave and go elsewhere, or do I tough it out and hope that it gets better? Because right now, I honestly don't know what to do. What a terrible work environment. You have management basically barking orders at you and clapping their hands telling you to chop chop hurry up, but they're the last people involved when it comes to rolling up their sleeves and getting the job done. And that to me is incredibly inappropriate, and it's not fair. I'm also really hesitant to say that this will ever get any better. If I was in your shoes, leaving this job and looking for something else most definitely would probably be something I would consider, because these people are just super toxic. Like, that lady literally watched you as you're trying to set the restaurant up, and instead of helping, she just rolled her eyes and acted like a lazy bum. And what's worse, the restaurant gossip and pettiness is just gonna get worse and worse over time. Management clearly isn't facing any repercussions, and it doesn't seem like they're going to receive any kind of reprimand anytime soon. So looking for something else probably wouldn't be a bad idea. Otherwise, you're still going to get treated like garbage by people who clearly undervalue your time and effort to try and make this restaurant run in an orderly manner. Today, I messed up by dressing casually for work, only for one of my colleagues to mistake me as one of my clients, causing her to treat me terribly and tell me to get out of the back office that I was trying to go into just to do my job. And it was honestly incredibly humiliating. Here's what happened. So I work with marginalized people with complex needs, and my specific role relates to having lived experience of homelessness, addiction, and complex trauma. There are a lot of different elements to it that I won't get into because they aren't relevant, but I do some work at a service for rough sleepers, which is where I was today. Most of my colleagues dress very casually for work. I try quite hard to be presentable because I guess I'm a bit worried about being judged for my background, even though that's literally why they employed me. It's also my first time in this type of job. However, right now in England, it is absolutely freezing, and I had to layer up, which meant I wasn't looking very officey, if you will. I was still clean, and I don't think I was that scruffy or anything like that. My clothes were just a bit mismatched and too big for me. At the place I was working, there's a drop-in area for the clients and an office area, which is staff only. I mainly chill in the client area since they're the people I'm there to work with, and only really go in the office area when I need to talk to a colleague or need to sit at a computer or something like that. This week, a member of staff I hadn't met before had come back from maternity leave and was in the office. I went to the office to introduce myself. I opened the door and popped my head around. Without even looking up, she just went, "No." And I was like, "Okay?" And I just backed up. I figured she was on a sensitive phone call or something like that. It was still rude, but you know, whatever. As a side note, her tone of voice really vividly reminded me of how people sometimes talk to me when I was homeless. I remember once trying to get a woman's attention as she was walking past me, and she had just that type of voice. She would rudely say no and would just keep walking because I guess she thought I was begging. I was actually trying to tell her that her dress was tucked into her tights. Anyways, I just got on with things for a bit until I actually had to go into the office. I started walking in and she jumped out of her chair and was like, "No, you cannot come in here," and literally started shooing me out the door with her hands. I kind of just allowed myself to be shooed, which probably speaks volume about my self-esteem, but the service manager, who I know pretty well, had arrived in the meantime and was also in the office. She looked at me like, "What on earth are you doing shooing this guy away? He works here." At this point, the rude colleague obviously backs down, but explains that because of my presentation and manner, she assumed I was a client. And when she said that, I was like, "Oh, okay. So you're cool with shooing away clients. Fantastic. Why do you work here again?" She then barely apologized to me, and I just said, "Okay," and told the service manager I was going to finish up my paperwork from home. I went home and I honestly had a little cry, since apparently the only thing separating me, the professional, from me as a homeless junkie once upon a time is a poorly fitting hoodie and a dorky hat. Not a good day for my self-esteem overall, to be completely honest. Now, I've dealt with the self-pity aspect, and I'm mainly just upset that this is how she thinks she should treat her clients. The service manager has emailed me about making a complaint, which to be honest, I probably will, even though it's the last thing I want to deal with. That is honestly disgusting. The fact that that lady works there and would possibly treat a client like that just to shoo them out the door and treat them like some kind of burden is enough evidence to prove that she really should not work there. Like, she is definitely there for the wrong reasons and needs to find a better line of work. This is up there with like a teacher who absolutely hates kids but decided, "You know what, I'm gonna be a teacher and teach in public schools." Like, no, you treat people terribly and you shouldn't be there. So if I was in your shoes and I had the chance to file a complaint, you better believe I'm gonna file that complaint. This lady needs to learn her lesson and change her tone of voice as well as her attitude towards possible clients coming in and out of their facility. They need care, they need love, they need understanding, and more importantly, they need at least somebody on their team. And if this is seriously how she would treat their potential clients, then in my opinion, she definitely needs to work somewhere else. I may be falling for a friend of mine that I have known for years and truly consider one of my best friends, and I honestly don't know what to do. I'm a 27-year-old female, and I have a close bud who's also 27 years old, who lives out of state. We've been friends for years through a group and a mutual hobby, but we have never had anything flirty between us. Life changes, we changed, and we're now more more compatible. We had a friend trip recently, and he flirted with me. But since it was out of nowhere, and we were both kind of under the influence, I gently shut it down. He made it crystal clear that he thinks I'm hot and have a great personality, and that I would be a top contender for the hypothetical situation of if we're both single down the line, we should just get married. Since that trip, I have not been able to stop thinking about him and that night. Maybe it's a bit too much info to share, but desire has been off the charts, and I feel like I missed an opportunity that I would have enjoyed. Still, we are dear friends, and I want to tread lightly. I don't know where he is at, or if alcohol was a factor in his behavior, or anything like that. Feelings are also tied up in this, and although I know I would like to spend some quality time with him, if you know what I mean, I don't know what I would want moving forward. We live far apart with no easy way to change that in the next few years. I also love this man, and I do not want to lose his friendship. There is a high chance that if we spend some quality time together, I will catch feelings. I don't know how he feels. I just know that he loves me as a friend, but we are also very different people emotionally. I also don't know that he is as concerned with the longevity of our relationship versus having immediate satisfaction. I'm having trouble with the wisest course of action. Our hobbies include overnights and shared sleeping accommodations, and I'm not going to avoid those. And as close as we are, and as much as I trust this guy, he's also a flirt, and he will approach women at bars. And I'm much more shy, to be honest. I don't want to toss our friendship over a night of quality time. This night also included vulnerability, a few tears, light cuddling, and affirming how much we really loved each other. We've been through some real stuff together over the years, and there's a ton of trust and affection. What do I do now? He's visiting again in a few weeks. If anyone has been in a similar situation or has advice on how to get clarity on what I really should do, I'm honestly open to hearing it. I feel like I would have shut this down with any other guy friend, but I don't know if I'm just lonely and vulnerable right now, or if this is really something that I want. What should I do? I think you really do have to just weigh the options, but I think from the outside looking in, it really looks like you guys already have a very high connection. Like, you never know. It might be a situation worth pursuing to some degree. You can even try and take it slow. I mean, you're both old enough to know how to do that at this point, hopefully, and you can maybe articulate that you want to try and take this slow if he's interested. So in my opinion, I say just go for it. You never know unless you try, and if he really is as good of a friend as you're saying, then I'm sure he would be understanding, and he would still want to be just friends with you if he doesn't feel the same way. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. So you might as well try and make some kind of move while you have the chance, because truly, who knows what could happen. An entitled Karen demands that I date her daughter, and if I don't, she says she's gonna get me fired, and I'm honestly baffled by what went down. Here's what happened. For some context, I'm a 17-year-old male, and I work at Segway Tour Company. It's actually really fun. I get to ride on Segways around the city and talk to people, and I get paid to do it. Plus, the tipping isn't bad. So anyway, there was a tour booked, and a couple of days ago, I came in about 20 minutes early to answer emails and get everything ready. The group shows up, and it's a mom and a daughter, and that's when things get interesting with this entitled Karen and her daughter. So this Karen and her daughter come in, and I check them in. I tell them that we have some waivers that I need them to sign, and then I ask the daughter how old she is. She states that she's 16, and then I direct her towards signing the waiver. I ask this because if kids are younger than 18, their parents have to sign the waiver for them. But this entitled Karen only heard me say the first part, not when I said that the daughter didn't need to sign a waiver. So she actually thought that I was just asking her daughter how old she was. And I'm pretty sure this is what started everything. We go on the tour, and while I'm giving my spiel, the entitled Karen keeps interrupting me to tell me stuff about her daughter and find if we are compatible. I'm explaining how this nonprofit organization opened up, only for this entitled Karen to ask me all of a sudden,
Are you in college?
I tell her no, I'm a junior in high school. I'm usually pretty free with info about myself on tours because it helps keep people relaxed and initiates conversations when there's a lull during the tour. Plus, it kind of helps with tipping. This entitled Karen then says,
Oh, well, my daughter's also a junior. She's an artist.
And this was not an isolated incident. Stuff like this kept happening throughout the tour, and every time, her daughter kept getting redder and redder in the face. My mom does this too, where she just tells random mall attendants about me, so I know what the daughter is going through, and I really do feel her pain. At the end of the tour, I tell the two of them that they have 15 minutes to go around the town, and then they can meet me back up at the Segway place. I get back, and I start getting things set up for their return. They roll in, pardon the pun, and I take the Segways to start charging them. This entitled Karen then continues the conversation by asking me what I think of her daughter. I didn't understand what she was asking, so I said, "Pardon me, what did you say?" She then says,
I saw you checking her out during the tour. Are you going to ask her out?
The daughter then chimes in, begging her mom to stop. I look at her and I say, ma'am, I just recently got out of a relationship and I'm not really looking for anything right now. This Karen was baffled by that because she just looked at me and said,
What? Is my daughter not good enough for you?
I said to her, no, that's not it. I just said I just got out of a relationship. And before I could continue any further, she then said that I am absolutely going to date her daughter and that's final. I responded by saying, you can't tell me what to do. I'm not your kid, and if I don't want to date your daughter, I don't have to. Besides, you haven't even asked me if she wants to date me. The daughter then chimes in and says, yeah, I really don't want to date him. But the entitled Karen wasn't having it, because that's when she said she was going to threaten to call my boss and tell him about my terrible customer service, claiming that I'm never going to work in this city ever again. And at this point, I was absolutely blown away because she was seriously trying to get me fired because I didn't want to date her daughter. So I pull out my phone and I say, all right, you want to call him and explain this situation? How you're trying to force me to date your daughter and get me fired for saying no? Then finally, I guess the absurdity of this situation finally sunk in and her face transitioned from pure rage to slight confusion. At this point, she tries to backtrack, but I look at her and I say, no, let's call him. So I start to go through my contacts and I press my boss's name. I look at her and I say, let's have this conversation. Let's do this. And just as the phone started ringing, this entitled Karen looks at her daughter and says,
let's get out of here.
And that's when the entitled Karen runs out the door as the daughter turns to me and says, I'm so sorry, following after her mom. I hang up the phone before my boss answers and I start cleaning the segues up. And I'm honestly still amazed at the audacity of this stupid entitled Karen. How crazy is that? Imagine trying to do your job and handle some kind of tour group, and this lady's like, no, you're gonna date my daughter or I'm gonna get you fired. She even threatened this person to be like, oh, you're never gonna work in the city again unless you date my daughter, who, by the way, doesn't want to date you either. Like, what a complete weirdo. But you know what? The way the original poster handled this was absolutely amazing. It was so well done. He called her on her bluff right then and there and didn't back down from this weird lady being a creep. So hopefully that lady learned her lesson, that she can't just pawn her daughter off at the next person she sees simply because she demands it. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My husband yelled at me because I can't move past the fact that my mom passed away, and what he said was really hurtful, and now I don't know what to do. So I lost my mother to terminal cancer 3.5 years ago. It was a traumatic time in my life, and I've been working with my therapist to move forward through some of my grief. One of my more disruptive symptoms is a hoarding compulsion, which makes it very difficult for me to throw away anything, especially my mother's things. And it even goes as far as not even wanting to use any of her things. My aunt and I were the only people there with my mom when she was sick, so I ended up inheriting all of her things. I now struggle sometimes with being overly protective of her possessions. The most difficult thing is the bed frame that held the mattress that she passed away in. Recently, my husband and I were fighting, and he came and sat down on the bed beside me, and the frame broke apart. I started to have a panic attack, and I lost control of myself. I felt as though I could not respond at all, and could barely move. He got even angrier, and told me that this was another example of my selfishness. The fact that I was being dramatic and not engaging with him. He then yelled at me that my mother died 3 years ago, and that I have to get over it. This upset me even more, and he got angrier again. He continued to yell, telling me that his family is going to die soon. And he said this, I guess as a way to suggest that what I've been through is not unique to me. My husband has a problem with being quite mean like this when he's angry, and it's made worse when I shut down and get quiet. I know that it's something I need to work on, and that I can't expect my partner to do all the talking in conflict. However, I just can't get past what he said and how much it hurt. I also feel guilty for being so dramatic and for all the ways that my grief interferes with our relationship. For example, I can have a lot of anxiety about the household, and sometimes I obsessively clean or order things, and it makes him feel on edge in our shared home. He has since apologized, and I have told him that it very deeply hurt me what he said. He said that he knows it was a terrible thing to say, and that he didn't realize I was having a panic attack. I don't know how that's possible, to be honest, as I was gasping to catch my breath. But now I'm at a loss. I don't feel any better about it, and I'm ashamed to say his apology meant nothing to me. I don't want to keep bringing it up, asking him to apologize apologize again and again, but I don't know what else to do. Has anyone had a line crossed like this before and gone on to repair things in a way that felt genuine? What should I do? First off, I just want to say that I'm really sorry for your loss. Honestly, who cares that it's been 3 years? This has been a very struggling period in your life, and as you put it, you've had a really hard time getting over this. So I really do understand where you're coming from. I think what your husband said really was inappropriate as well. The fact that he would say basically just get over the death of your mom suddenly is really inappropriate, but I think you are taking the steps necessary by meeting with a therapist to try and help with these compulsions that you're struggling with. Eventually, you really can get to a place where you are more comfortable with putting your mother's stuff away and moving forward with your life. But clearly, you're not really ready to make those steps in your life. When it comes to what your husband had to say, I think he just said that in anger, and he really did apologize. And I think you do have the right idea here. Asking him to apologize again and again because that first apology was just not good enough is only going to cause conflict. So I think you really should just take what he's saying at face value. He apologized, he said he's sorry for what he said, and he didn't know that you were having a panic attack over the situation at hand. Maybe he just completely missed the fact that you were gasping for breath. Who knows? So hopefully this all works out for you, because this sounds like a rough situation, and I can only imagine the grief that you're still struggling with. My 2 entitled friends are choosing to hang out with my parents, who have abused me and treated me so poorly my entire life. Things are so bad that they're even being invited to Christmas and Thanksgiving, while I'm being left out in the cold by my parents. And at this point, I don't know what to do. So my parents and I have never had the best relationship. My mom has narcissistic traits, and my dad is her enabler, meaning my brothers and I were always abused by my mom, and my dad did nothing to stop her. Well, within the last 2 years, my mom has gotten worse. I told my friends about it, and they got to see some of her craziness during the last year, and that was just a small amount of what I know is possible. My friends have seen how my mom's behavior has negatively affected me and have helped me to not just take a deep dive into depression. Thus, I thought they would understand how I felt about my parents and people in my life, as well as just generally being around my parents, especially my mom, who is also manipulative. Well, this year I moved out of my parents' house, even though it was a hard thing to do because I wasn't able to or allowed to have a job when living with them, so I honestly had limited resources. My other friends understood the assignment and helped me get on my feet. However, 2 of my friends started hanging out with my parents, and I only found out because one of them sent me pictures of one of the events. I was quite upset and surprised that they would do that when they had been saying that they understood me when I said I wanted to move out and separate myself from my parents the whole time. Well, with advice and encouragement from other friends, I talked to them about getting all close and hunky-dory with my parents. They said they understood, and we came to an agreement. They can still hang out with my parents, but I have to be told about it and stay in the loop. But they also wanted to make sure we were still close friends. Well, they started going to events that they knew I wasn't invited to, such as 4th of July or Thanksgiving, as well as Sunday lunch, stuff like that. And you guessed it, they were sending me pictures of said events. Not being invited by my parents was just them trying to convince people that they did invite me, but I just didn't want to be there, which is just not true. Now, I know we came to an agreement that they can still hang out with my parents, but I feel like they are just being rude and inconsiderate and incredibly disrespectful to me. And yes, I have explained that I find it thoughtless for them to go to these events while they know I wasn't invited. And these are not small events. These are things like Christmas or Thanksgiving or even the 4th of July. These are cornerstone moments that I'm supposed to be sharing with my family, but they're cutting me off. Now, I found out that one of these friends are hosting a graduation party, but I wasn't invited or even told about it by either friend. No, I was told about it by my mom, and it is being held in less than 2 weeks. The only reason my mom told me about it was because she wanted to know if I wanted to ride with her. I feel so hurt by this, but I don't want my emotional state to lead me down the wrong path, so I'm honestly not sure what to do. I have to be honest, the 2 people you call friends who are actively trying to have some kind of role in your parents' life are not friends in the slightest. Your parents are doing one of 2 things. They're either making sure that you stay in their toxic web for the rest of your life, or they're using your friends against you, basically trying to make you feel guilty for walking out on them. And I bet you it's probably that second option. Like, why else would they be so enthusiastic to try and bring your friends into their life, if not to try and get back at you and ruin your life in some way, like they've done since you were just a kid? And that's not fair for you in the slightest. So I'm very surprised in the first place that you've even wasted your time with these people. These are not good friends, and they can hardly be called friends in the first place. If anything, they're definitely showing their true colors. So if I was in your shoes, I would almost be tempted to cut cut these people off as well. They do not deserve to be called your friends if they're going to sympathize with your abusers. So maybe it's time to take some steps to tell them that no, this is not okay. And if they still want to hang out with your parents, then let that be the red flag you were looking for, that these people were never on your side and they're only out to hurt you and to harm you. An entitled Karen refuses to get out of the middle of the road while she's jogging, claiming that people should just go around her, despite the fact that she's not giving anybody any room to go around her. And I honestly have never been more annoyed in my life. Here's what happened. So my fiance and I live in an apartment with a horrible entrance. There are two ways you can get into the parking lot of our apartment. One way is through a hairpin turn, and I mean literally a hairpin tight turn, off of a 45-mile-an-hour road. And the second way is to cut through a neighborhood, which splits you out into the townhouse parking next to my apartment. The road is pretty narrow on the one side, and the entire road is separated by a double yellow line with turn lanes to turn into different cul-de-sacs. The neighborhood also has huge sidewalks that cut through the middle of people's driveways. The road is also full of blind turns and hills, which makes it hard to see if there's oncoming traffic. Many people have gotten into accidents towards the entrance, trying to pass walkers who aren't on the sidewalk. This will be important later. I was coming home from work yesterday when I turned into the neighborhood. A woman, maybe late in her 30s, was jogging in the middle of the road. Yes, you heard that correctly. Smack dab in the middle, not off to the side of the middle or anything like that. I slowed down behind her and I left about a car's length between me and her. I tried to find a good place to pass her since I couldn't see up the hill or around the bend of the road. The woman began gesturing at me to move over before stopping altogether and banging on the hood of my car, telling me to move over. At this point, I stopped in the middle of the road. She came up to my window and asked me to roll it down. When I rolled my window down, she started shouting at me that I needed to pass her and that I can't drive behind her because she doesn't want cars behind her. I told her I couldn't see if it was safe to pass yet, so I didn't. I also told her to just use the sidewalk that was literally less than a couple of inches away from her. As this interaction went on, about 8 or 9 cars flew down the left side going well over 25 miles an hour. She yelled at me that I don't live here and I don't understand how the neighborhood works, and that apparently nobody uses the sidewalk because it cuts through driveways, as if that has anything to do with anything. I told her if she wasn't going to use the sidewalk, then she's going to have to deal with people slowing down behind her, or that she should just step out of the road and wait till the cars pass to continue jogging. She just gave an over-exaggerated sigh and said that I was being dumb and childish before walking over to the sidewalk and continuing her stupid jog. She later started complaining about me online, calling me a dumb, selfish teenager who can't drive, stating that the neighbors need a gate to keep the trespassers out. But this stupid entitled Karen doesn't know that I do live here, and hopefully next time she just uses the sidewalk, because I really don't want to have to deal with her ever again. What an absolute moron. Like, why on earth would she be running in the middle of the road like that? And why would the sidewalks cutting through people's driveways in any way, shape, or form be a good enough excuse for you to run and hog the whole road? It sounds like this is a dangerous neighborhood as it is, so the fact that she's just running in the middle of the road, blocking traffic, is basically her asking for trouble. And that's not fair for the drivers that have to put up with that garbage. And worst of all, she really tried to flip this on the driver and make this their problem, instead of just owning up to it and getting out of the way. Like, she got so mad that she was banging on the hood of the car. I mean, what kind of weird entitlement do you have to think you can run through the middle of the road and get away with it? So hopefully, for the sake of the original poster, this crazy Karen doesn't live close by, because otherwise you're gonna have to deal with some weird neighbor who's gonna be all up in your business and making weird, intrusive comments about you and your fiance. My mom's neighbor is being incredibly creepy, leaving flowers for my elderly mom, and all around just being quite weird, and I honestly don't know what to do. So my mom is physically and mentally disabled. She relies on a wheeled walker to get around, but isn't fully stable and has had falls in the past. She's also schizophrenic with early stage dementia, hence she's exceptionally vulnerable both physically and mentally. She moved into a new flat about 2 months ago, and one of her upstairs neighbors, a male in his 40s, seems to be taking an unusual interest in her. I've met this guy, and for the sake of privacy, this guy's name is going to be called Bob, and I've only seen him a few times, and he's always seemed overly interested in my mom. He always looks at her intently, and when I've tried to talk to him, he largely ignores me and barely breaks eye contact with her. He stops her every time we happen to see him when we're going out and seems caught on every word she says, even when it's nonsensical word salad due to her schizophrenia. He's taken in and delivered parcels to her when everyone else just leaves neighbors' stuff on a chair in the communal entrance. appearance. He goes out of his way to be nice to her. It's almost like he has a crush on her, but no rational man in his 40s is going to be attracted to an exceptionally vulnerable 70-year-old woman with complex physical and mental care needs. Now, I'm autistic, so I initially put it down to him possibly being on the spectrum, especially as the building was initially sheltered housing. But I feel like even accounting for possible social difficulties, he's a bit too friendly to her. Yesterday, I left my mom's property at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then returned about 90 minutes later to drop off a prescription, and I found her all flustered and irritable. She told me that Bob had rang her doorbell, steaming drunk, asking to be let in. He claimed he forgot his FOB. Because the flats are so small and closely packed, you can hear when someone rings a neighbor's bell. According to my mom, he didn't try anyone else's bell. He just went straight to hers. Now, he knows that my mom is very physically disabled, so it seems strange that he'd ring her bell. Her 2 other neighbors are in their 40s and physically fit, so why not just ring theirs? I feel like most people would try to avoid bothering an elderly disabled person, and his reason also made no sense to me. Apparently, he'd forgot his FOB, but had his individual door key. You'd keep them together since you always need them as a pair to get in. I could see him forgetting both, but not one. Furthermore, there's 3 key safes outside the flat with spare FOBs for this exact scenario. 3 safes to floor flatmates, making it quite likely, in my opinion, that he would have the code to at least one of them. So he forgot his FOB but not his key, didn't have access to any of the 3 key safes with spare FOBs, and rather than call his immediate and much younger neighbors for assistance, he went straight to the most vulnerable person on the property. Fast forward to 8 o'clock in the morning, and my mom informed me that he's left her a bunch of red carnations in the Christmas wreath that she was hanging on the outside of her door, not on the floor, in the wreath. We're not sure when he did this, but she didn't hear anything last night or this morning, so that makes me think he's crept over in the middle of the night while she and everyone else has been sleeping. No one has curtains on their flat doors because the glass is heavily frosted, but you can still see shadows, lights, and other silhouettes. It makes me uncomfortable that he approached her door in the middle of the night to place flowers on her door. Like I said, he can't really see anything, but it just strikes me as odd. I feel like something's wrong here, and I'm not sure what to do about it. Can anyone advise on what might be going on and what action, if any, I should be taking? I almost feel like he's trying to groom her. I've spoken to my mom about this, and I've explained that his behavior feels off, but she got offended because she liked the flowers and thinks that they were possibly just an apology for his drunkenness the other night. I honestly can't tell if this is just a potentially autistic individual who isn't aware of the social etiquette of certain things, or if this is something more sinister. How do I approach this? Do I speak to him? Do I inform him of my concerns? My gut is telling me something's wrong, but I have no idea what to do. I think the original poster's gut is right. This really seems sketchy. It could be a situation where he's trying to gain some kind of relationship or a friendship of some kind with your mom, just so he can try and steal her money. So if anything, maybe see if you can try to get through to her, because the way this guy is acting is super sketchy, and I just would not take this lightly if I was in your shoes. My entitled mom takes my baby away from me and refuses to give her back until I clean my room, and this is a frustrating trend that keeps happening, and I honestly can't stand it. Here's what happened. Now, this was in 2020, and despite me still learning about myself, because I was growing as a new parent, my mother always wanted my room spotless. Now, I have ADHD and cleaning-related PTSD that my mother absolutely caused, and the dirtiest my room gets is maybe some empty packages and clothes on the floor, because once my room begins to bother me, I will clean it. I also hate being told what to do, and will do the opposite just to spite the authority figures. Now, my mother had bugged me about my room for several days at this point, and being honest, it was not as bad as she painted it to be. It was in no way a tripping hazard or a biohazard for my child. Yes, I was depressed snacking for the first 6 months of my daughter's life, but I purposefully put the trash can next to my bed, so I had no reason not to throw away my trash. My room is very small, crowded with furniture, leaving me about 2.5 feet of walking room from the door to the nightstands. I have a crib and a wardrobe, as well as my queen-size bed in the small 10 by 15 foot room, so hardly enough space to really raise a child, but you know what? I do my best. The newborn stage was the hardest stage for me, as I was an insomniac and I never slept well. I found sleeping with my daughter on my chest brought me enough peace so I could sleep peacefully, despite waking up in pain due to how I was sleeping. Ever since my daughter was born, I slept unmoving when she was next to me, and it caused me some issues. This would mean I would fall asleep with my head on my arm, and I would wake up to pins and needles and a mark on my arm from her laying there. So I had just fed my daughter daughter and needed a morning nap as I was exhausted and I was still having trouble sleeping at night. I then hear the lock unlocking from my door and I just ignore it as I fell asleep, thinking that I would be left alone since my daughter and I were having a nice nap together. As I'm laying there resting my eyes, I feel my daughter being pulled away from my arms as I had my hands on her back and her head, with my sheets well below her waist, so it was obvious I was holding her. Thinking my mother had just walked in from concern for my daughter's safety, I say out loud, "Don't worry, I'm not asleep right now," as she did not know how my sleeping habits had changed since my daughter's birth. She told me to get my butt up and to start cleaning right now. She flipped the switch on the light in my dimly lit room, causing me to wince. I gently try to fight back as not to injure my newborn baby, but my mother started pulling my daughter towards her a little bit harder, so I just let go of my little daughter before she got hurt. I told her, "You should know after 19 years, I don't respond to being told what to do. Leave my kid alone and get out of my room." It's a rule throughout the house that nobody is allowed in my room due to this very problem, but my mother always barges in my room using her stupid keys. She takes my kid and says, "You can have her back once you clean this room." I wanted to call her a bunch of different names and tell her that my child is not a bargaining chip, but I bit my tongue and I didn't respond as she just walked out the door. I sat on my bed for 20 minutes trying to figure out what just happened before going to grab my kid, refusing to clean up the small pile of clothes in the corner of my room. I just lied to her and said that I cleaned everything up. And while she has walked in on me during personal time or when I'm just trying to relax, this incident is by far the worst experience I've had. I get why she needed a key to my door, especially at the time with me always being tired during the day, but my daughter never missed a bottle and was never neglected. If she was awake, I was awake. I was playing with her or spending time with her or just taking care of her. If I fell asleep, she was put down for a nap and she would wake me up when something was wrong. My mother never helped me in any way, shape, or form, but I don't get why she feels so entitled to my daughter. Thankfully, in the future, with my upcoming stay in babysitting, I'll be leaving soon to find another place to live. So hopefully until then, incidents like this don't happen ever again. I think it's super inappropriate for the mom to be acting this way towards her daughter. Like legitimately, you can't just go in there and take her daughter and say, "Oh, you'll get your baby back once you clean up this room." Like that is not how this works. That is legitimately not your child and you can't just do that. That's like really bad in my opinion. This also begs the question of what kind of environment is this lady in? She clearly is a single mom, or at least it sounds like it, and it sounds like she's living with her mother and that things are definitely not going well right now. But it does sound like there's some kind of silver lining here, because the original poster went on to say that they will eventually be able to move out because of the job that they have. But at the moment, they are just kind of stuck in their mom's house. So hopefully the original poster is able to move out of their mom's house, because their mom sounds incredibly toxic, and the way she's acting despite the extenuating circumstances is, in my opinion, highly inappropriate. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. An entitled Karen gives me an attitude as I'm just trying to direct her where to go in the hospital I work at. But after she gets lost, she comes back to my desk, only for her and her son to miss their appointment, simply because she didn't know how to listen. So on my campus, outpatient imaging like x-rays, CT scans, and MRIs are done in a building separate from the main hospital. Very occasionally, the inpatient imaging department will take some patients when there are simply too many appointments for the outpatient center to handle. They have a very tiny registration office and waiting room for when that does happen. However, it is important to know that they only open it when they are expecting outpatient appointments. Otherwise, they just keep it closed. Today, this lady and her very young child came in and walked up to my desk. She let me know they were here for his imaging appointment and wanted to know where they needed to go. I looked them up and I saw that they were going to the outpatient imaging building. I pointed it in the directions and I began to speak, and she almost immediately cut me off. "No, we're going to this one." And she's referring to the one that's closed down. I was confused, but I let her know that the patient chart was showing me that she would be going to the outpatient building. She huffed and let me know that I was apparently incorrect and that she knew that she was going to the tiny registration room since she went there last time. The problem is, since inpatient imaging was not expecting any outpatient appointments today, that little room is closed and there would be no one there to redirect her. So I just repeated myself one more time and let her know that her chart said that she would be going to the other building. But when she interrupted me again, I just stopped trying and I said, "You know what? Okay." She had a little speech about how she was already late, which was only about by 5 minutes. But I just kept saying, "Okay," until she walked off in the wrong direction. In all honesty, I'm not sure how much time had passed before this next part happened, but but it was probably at least 30 minutes to an hour. I heard a few sets of footsteps down the hall, and I recognized this lady's voice immediately. She was complaining to someone else about how our hospital was ridiculous, and it was unacceptable that she was waiting for so long before someone came to get her. I didn't even want to turn around to look at her. It turns out she walked herself and her child to the closed registration waiting area. She waited outside the locked doors for however many minutes and just began wandering the halls until a nurse finally found her. And of course, this innocent nurse didn't know how I already tried to tell her where to go, so she brought her back to me and said to this lady, "Oh, this person can help you." Before the lady could say anything, I said, "Yep, like I said, your appointment was at the outpatient building right out there." We then had a brief conversation that went something like this. This lady then looked at me and said, "Well, now we're really late." I said to her, "Yes, unfortunately, it looks like you've missed your appointment time." As a side note, there are usually two times: arrival time so you can fill out paperwork, and table time, which is the time you need to be in your gown and on the table. In our hospital, once you miss your table time, they will no longer take you, and you need to reschedule. This entitled Karen then said, "So will they still see him?" But I responded with some bad news. I said, "Unfortunately, no, you will need to reschedule." She then says, "Well, I need you to call them and tell them that I did show up. I was just lost." And I'm pretty sure she said this just so she didn't get billed for missing the appointment. But I told her that I unfortunately could not do that for her. She then practically demanded that I make her a new appointment. But unfortunately, that's not what I do at this desk. And so instead, I gave her the phone number that she can call to set up another appointment. And when I said that, she definitely was not happy. She said, "Wait, are you serious? What do you even mean? Can't you do it?" I said, "Nope, I make sure everyone has a mask and I direct people to their appointments." "Okay, whatever, thanks for nothing." This entitled Karen then went out the front door while tugging on her child, and I did not dare to tell her to have a nice day. The poor nurse was just trying to be helpful, and so she then started to apologize. But I let her know that it's just fine, because entitled people like that truly cannot be helped. That lady was just obnoxious. If she would just pipe down and listen to this front desk attendant, she probably would have known where to go and probably made her appointment. But instead, she tried to act like she knew this place inside and out and just decided right then and there, "Oh, I know where I'm going." Maybe next time if she just listens though, she won't make a fool of herself wandering around the hospital, and also she might just make her appointment. My manager makes a very inappropriate comment towards me, right as I'm trying to cash out at the end of my shift. But I responded with something equally as painful and hurtful towards him, and I'm not sure what to do. So I used to work at a private restaurant, and I loved every second of it and carry what I learned with me in terms of work ethic, multitasking, and the importance of keeping face as well as customer service through every job I'd had seen. Part of the reason it was such a great gig for over 2 years was because the two owners were hilarious and for the most part were respectful to all their workers, but were quick to strictly enforce their rules and stand up to terrible customers. Overall, they really were great guys, but arguably a little rough around the edges. Cue now the worst interaction with this guy. A week before this interaction, I was in an accident and had a large cut on my arm. I try not to talk about my personal business at work, and this injury, combined with some crazy, insane issues with my roommate's girlfriend, caused my chipper demeanor to be changed. Coworkers started to speculate what was going on, and I can only assume rumors were floating around. I went to the office to cash out with management at the end of my shift, and I caught the owners. They were done cooking for the day and they were shooting whiskey. They were a bit under the influence, and they started joking around. In retrospect, maybe they were just trying to cheer me up, but I had a short fuse, and the joke landed wrong because of the chaos going on in my life. I say something a little mean in response to the joke, and the owner looks at me and says, "Oh yeah? Well, maybe next time you try to hurt yourself, make sure you finish the job." After that, everything stopped. I stood there with my mouth open, fuming. I kept staring and said quite plainly something I never expected I would ever say. I looked at him and said, "Wow, I'm starting to see why your wife left you." I quickly finished cashing out and I got out of there. The next day, when the owner wasn't there, I pulled our main manager aside and I said, "I can handle a lot, but that was too far. I didn't try to hurt myself, but man, what if I did?" We had a long discussion and he asked me what I wanted to do about it. I told him that I don't need to kiss and make up per se, but I just wanted to make sure that my sentiments about the situation were explained to him. The owner never ended up apologizing to me, but I could tell by the way he was overly nice to me and never joked with me again that he realized he was wrong. What a sketchy situation. In my opinion, and maybe I'm the minority here, if you're the owner of a restaurant and you're getting drunk on the job, then you probably need to find somebody else to run that place. That's really irresponsible in my opinion. What if something went down and they needed you right then and there? only to then find you plastered in the back office. I think that's just not a good look, and it's honestly not acceptable in my opinion. I also think the comments that the owner made is just really disgusting, hoping that they maybe next time just finish the job of hurting themselves. There is a very heavy and nefarious implication associated with them saying, "Oh, I hope you hurt yourself," and hopefully the nuance of that is pretty obvious to you, if you know what I mean. So that especially makes that comment incredibly hurtful. So hopefully something like that doesn't happen in the future, and hopefully the owner of this restaurant doesn't just get plastered with whiskey shots in the back during business hours at that. That's really unprofessional and really should be saved for your own personal time. Today I messed up by taking a girl on the worst first date she has ever been on, eventually leading to everything spiraling out of control, with her inevitably getting a DUI right in front of me. Here's what happened. So I was a bartender at a small dive bar, and a friend of mine by the name of Diana, that's not her real name, came in with one of her friends by the name of Sarah, also not her real name. I was catching up with Diana and could tell her friend was into me because she was flirting pretty hard. Diana was getting pretty tipsy throughout the night, and Sarah decided it was time to go home. Sarah then slipped me her phone number and said to let her know when her friend got home safe. The rest of the night was fun, and we had a good time catching up. After I sent my friend home in an Uber, I texted Sarah and let her know that her friend was in an Uber heading home safely. She immediately responded that she didn't give me her number for that reason only, and I said that she made it pretty clear about that. And after that, we made plans to go on a date a couple of days later. Fast forward to the date. We went to a semi-upscale restaurant downtown, and I was a little nervous because Sarah was very attractive and a little bit out of my league. We really got into it and started having a great time. We ordered some beers as well as some food, and it seemed like we were having a good connection. But this is when things really went south. Halfway through the date, my nose starts gushing with blood out of nowhere too. This sometimes happens to me when the air gets dry or when the seasons change. I get up quickly and I start running for the bathroom, leaving all my stuff at the table, my phone included. I was in the bathroom for probably about half an hour trying to stop this nosebleed. It felt like so much time had passed that I was almost sure that she had gotten up and left. I finally came out and I see that the table had been cleared and everything was boxed up. I sit down and I explain what happened, and she said she actually thought I just ghosted her, so she paid for everything. It didn't really make sense to me why she thought that, since I left all my stuff at the table, but whatever. We finished the date on a good note and made plans to do this again within the next few days. I walked her over to her car across the street, I gave her a hug and a kiss, and I said goodnight. Where she messed up, granted, is that I only had 2 beers over the course of the whole date, as did she. But while I was in the bathroom, she must have slammed a couple of shots or something, but seemed fine to me. As I was walking to my car, I see her peel out the wrong direction up a one-way street with a cop sitting right there. The lights turn on and she gets pulled over in front of the lot that I am literally parked in. And to top it all off, she's blocking my only way out. I get in my car and I sit for about 10 minutes while the cop runs her information. A second cop car pulls up, and it's at this point I realize it's gonna get bad. The cop pulls forward and waves me through to let me out, and I go straight home. The next day before going into work, I get a text message from Sarah saying that she had some personal stuff come up and that she isn't ready for a romantic relationship right now. And I said that I totally understood. When I got to work, my boss already had her mugshot pulled up and asked me how my date went last night. So it pretty much confirmed my suspicions. She ended up getting a DUI, and we honestly never got that second date. What a terrible situation. I mean, first off, how does she honestly assume that you just straight up ghosted her when all of your stuff is literally on the table? I mean, it doesn't take a genius to realize, oh, he's probably gonna come back. And I bet there was some kind of interaction of him saying, oh, excuse me, I'm gonna go use the bathroom real quick. But also, why on earth was she drinking so much and then deciding to jump behind the wheel? That's really irresponsible in my opinion, and she absolutely should not have done that. So honestly, this is not your fault. This kind of seems like it's her own fault for getting drunk and then getting behind the wheel. There's no way you could have predicted that, so I wouldn't be so hard on yourself. But hopefully she learned a valuable lesson, because getting drunk and then trying to drive is never a good combination. My fiance and I are having a huge fight over our wedding, since I don't want his toxic brother there, but he is demanding that he should be allowed to show up. And now I don't know what to do. I'm a 27-year-old female and my fiance is 25. We've been together since my senior year of high school and have been engaged for about 6 months. We've just started the process of wedding planning, and so far we don't have an exact date yet and no one has been invited. My fiance's brother, who's 22 years old, is, to put it simply, a bad person. We've never gotten along. I've always been close with his other family members, but his brother has been mean to me since day one of us dating. dating and is literally a criminal. He was in and out of juvie throughout high school, mostly for shoplifting, and once because of a threat he made on school grounds. He currently is unemployed and taking complete advantage of his girlfriend while he does illegal substances and she works 2 jobs. My brother and him are the same age and we're in the same class, and they absolutely hate each other. He was my brother's bully in high school, and my brother came home on multiple occasions, literally crying because my fiance's brother was making fun of him or trying to peer pressure him into illegal activities. During this time, my fiance was always on my side and would talk to his brother and try to stop it. He's never been close to him and never defended his behavior, which is why when I told him I don't want his brother at the wedding, I was surprised that he had any issue. A few nights ago, we were making a guest list of everyone that we want to invite, and we were writing down all the names of his family members. I told him, well, everyone besides your brother can come because obviously we don't need him there. Much to my surprise, my fiance got super upset with me. He told me that he's family and it would be wrong not to invite him. He said it's his wedding too, and I don't get to decide whether or not his own brother can come along. I told him I'm not under any circumstances having someone like that at my wedding, especially since my brother will be there and it will probably cause a fight. I told him it's a no, period. I'm not even considering inviting him. He then said that I'm being controlling and I'm acting like it's only my wedding when it's also his too. But am I really? I just don't want toxic people there. I don't want fights between our brothers. And like I said, my fiance and him are not even close. It's not like I'm taking away his best friend. They literally haven't spoken to each other in a year. My fiance has been mad at me for a few days now, especially over me saying that I don't want him there, period. But literally neither of us are budging on this. And now I don't know what to do. I'm worried if I don't let him come along, it'll ruin the whole day for my fiance. And if he does come along, it'll ruin the whole day for me and my brother. What should I do? This is definitely a tricky situation. There's clearly a history here where your fiance's brother is an absolutely garbage human being, and it runs deep. He literally bullied your brother while they were in high school, and that's absolutely inappropriate. The first thing I would look to is see if there's any kind of progress as a human being. Like, has he grown up at all? Or is he legitimately still that same immature person who's doing terrible things all these years later? There is a chance that he maybe has changed, who knows? But it's obviously still a possibility that he is still this reckless, toxic person. So on one hand, you could try to let him come along and maybe have a budget for some kind of security guard, specifically to keep an eye on him. So if he kind of loses his cool, or if he shows up high, or starts anything with anybody, he will immediately get removed. It's definitely important to have some kind of compromise in this situation, because maybe this is your brother's way of extending an olive branch and trying to reach out again. He probably just doesn't have another opportunity to do that. Who knows? There's a lot going on here. But either way, hopefully this works out for you, because this is a special day for the both of you, and it would really suck if this guy comes in and completely ruins the day for everybody involved. My entitled son steals my dead wife's ring and uses it to propose to his toxic girlfriend. Things got so bad that I threatened to call the police and take him to court for breaking into my house and stealing a family heirloom. And as a result, his gold-digging fiance has left him, and he now blames me for all the misfortune in his life. And I honestly don't know what to do. Here's what happened. To say I was mad would be an understatement. I have a son by the name of Jake, and Jake was a good kid growing up, so him doing this was a complete shock to me. I have a daughter too by the name of Amber. When my wife passed away from COVID nearly 2 years ago, she already had a will in place. She was immunocompromised due to a prior condition that she was diagnosed with a decade before she passed away, and she made sure she had a will set up just in case anything happened to her. And in said will, she divided her assets between our children, and Jake got his cut as he was already 21. He used that money to put a down payment on a condo, while also getting his mother's car in the process. But the will stated that my daughter was to get all of my wife's jewelry, and that included a vintage gold ring with a diamond on it that had a light blue sapphire on each side. That ring has been passed down for generations in my wife's family. It was even originally her grandmother's wedding band. Her grandfather's husband was a jeweler and handcrafted the ring for himself, and it was passed down to my wife's mother when her grandmother passed away, and then to my wife herself when her mother passed away. So it, along with all the other jewelry, was to all go to my daughter. This will be important later. When my wife passed away, my grief was intense, but I powered through it for the sake of my family, and they supported me 100%. So the betrayal from my son was just a rusty knife in the back for me. For the past 8 months, Jake has been dating a girl by the name of Sarah. She has my son wrapped around her finger, and she loves jewelry, as she adorns herself with it a lot. My son mentioned the family jewels my wife left his sister to Sarah one day, and Sarah really wanted to see them. So Jake went into my room when no one was home and showed them to her. He later admitted to me that he had done this, and when I found out, I was absolutely angry. But right when I thought that would be the end of it, I was wrong. Jake then came to me a week ago and begged me for that ring from his mother's family jewels because he wanted to use it to propose to Sarah. He said Sarah had fallen in love with the ring when she saw it before, and he just thought it'd be the perfect ring to ask her to marry him with. He seemed completely convinced that I jumped for joy for him wanting to propose, but instead, I told him that I was not the person to ask, as the ring belonged to Amber, and I wouldn't have him pressuring her to give it up either. For a fair chance, I'd allow him to explain his reasons and ask her for it once, but only once without pressuring her. And if she refuses for any reason, that would be the end of it. Jake agreed and asked Amber for the ring right in front of me, but she told him no, because she wanted to keep it in the family jewels and has always loved that ring. To her, it's completely priceless. She couldn't bear to ever give it up. I told Jake that was that, and not to press the matter any further. Jake left looking very unhappy about not getting the ring, but I thought he would let it go and look into finding a smaller one. But he came back another day while I was at work to talk to his sister after she got home from school. Jake and Amber then got into a huge fight about the ring, and Amber called me crying. So I called Jake and I told him to get out of my house and leave his sister alone. Jake yelled at me that he has just as much of a right to that ring as his sister does, because my wife was his mother too. But I reminded him that he got a lot of his mother's money and her car. The jewelry is Amber's and only hers. He then quickly hung up on me, and Amber later texted me saying that he left very angry. Later, right before I left for work, my daughter called and told me that Jake came back. He walked in dressed in a suit, went into my room and took something. Then he left without saying anything to Amber. She tried to keep him from leaving, but he shoved her out of the way. I rushed home as soon as my shift was over, and I checked my wife's jewelry box, and just as you would suspect, the ring was gone. I immediately called Jake, but he wouldn't answer his phone, so I messaged him, stating that I'll call the police if he doesn't return the ring. Using it to propose to Sarah won't stop me from taking it back. That eventually finally made him call me back, and he tried to say that I couldn't do that to him, simply because he's my son. I said I can and I will, because he outright stole the ring, and he'd better bring it back right away, or I would take drastic measures. Well, he phoned me right after that, and in a whisper, he said that it was too late. He had taken his girlfriend out to dinner and proposed to her with the ring. He didn't even have it for more than an hour by this point, and yet the ring was already on her finger. I said that was his problem. He stole the ring and he should bring it back. It is not his, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure it's returned. And if that means going to the police and blowing the whole situation up, then so be it. I will file a report. I'll even get a lawyer involved. At this point, Jake started crying and saying that I couldn't do this to him. I told him, tough luck. He stole from both his sister and his dead mother. I would not back down until that ring was returned. Jake wouldn't stop crying and making excuses, so I told him to have the ring back by morning, or I would be moving forward with legal action. Jake is my son, but he still broke the law, and I couldn't overlook what he had done. He said he'd be by in the morning to talk, and ended the call while crying even more. Well, Jake did show up in the morning and brought his girlfriend with him to try and guilt trip us. It turns out she not only knew he stole the ring, but she also wanted to keep it anyways. And this is because apparently she was completely in love with the ring since she first laid eyes on it. I told her I didn't care. She could have a jeweler make a copy of it or something like that, but the original doesn't belong to her. It belongs to my daughter and deceased wife. Jake begged me one more time to not make her give it back, but myself and my daughter stood firm. Return the ring or face the police, and maybe even a potential lawsuit. Jake's girlfriend pulled the ring off her finger and dropped it in my daughter's hand. They called me an evil jerk, then left my house in tears. Jake started screaming at me, stating that I may have just destroyed his relationship. I responded by saying that he did this to his own relationship by stealing a ring that didn't belong to him. What kind of son steals from his own sister and dead mother? That is honestly just terrible. Jake had nothing more to say to me and walked out to follow after his girlfriend. I didn't get anyone else involved in the situation, but Jake did. He tried getting support from friends and family, but he got the exact opposite opposite reaction that he'd hoped for. They were all mad at him over what he had done. I got many phone calls and messages from people offering me condolences, saying that they were not on Jake's side. I tried to do damage control, but now everybody knows. It's been a week now and Jake refuses to speak to me. I've sent him detailed pictures of the ring, just in case he wanted a jeweler to replicate it, but making a copy would be a very expensive ordeal. That is, unless he uses some fake stones or something along the lines. And thus far, there has been no response. I don't know what the situation is with his girlfriend, and I don't even know if she even is still his girlfriend after what happened, but I still stand by the fact that Jake had to return the ring. I have since had all my wife's jewelry placed in a safety deposit box that only I have access to, and the jewelry will remain there until my daughter is 21 years old, and it may even stay there if she wants to keep it safe that way. I know I'm in the right to have reclaimed the ring, however, I don't want my son to hate me, and I don't want the family to hate me as well. The original poster actually gave us an update to further explain the aftermath of that situation. Here's what they had to say. Well, my son's girlfriend Sarah has officially broken up with him. He is devastated and blamed me entirely. Some previously pointed out that I gave him too much credit in saying that he was a good kid. He honestly used to be, but the person he is now, I just do not recognize. Whether he was always like this deep down, or if he just fell for the wrong person and let her change him for the worse is a mystery to me, but it doesn't justify what he did. After I forced him and Sarah to return the stolen ring, she apparently spent days crying on his bed, then told Jake that she didn't want a different ring, no matter how much he told her that he would get her another one. She was simply adamant that she wanted my deceased wife's ring, and she couldn't imagine possibly having a different one for their engagement now that it had already been on her hand, despite the fact that it had only been a few hours and it was stolen goods. The last time I met someone who cried that much about being made to return stolen property was when they were 4 years old. I heard more than one person say they thought Sarah was being a big baby about it. The situation was no secret because Jake spilled the beans, looking for support to the whole family, as well as Sarah's family and friends. As previous readers know, that backfired badly for them. Well, after Jake's failed gambit for support, all the local drama lovers latched onto the situation like barnacles on a boat, and they kept messaging me with more information, even though I wasn't asking. So I was being kept in the loop, even though Jake and Sarah weren't talking to me. My son had the pictures I sent him so that he could try and replicate the ring, and took them to a jeweler. The jeweler said he could make a similar ring based on the pictures, but he'd want to closely examine the original to take proper measurements and to make an evaluation of the stones and metal in order to see what it take to make it as close of a copy as possible. Jake waited for a while until finally swallowing his pride to call me again. His girlfriend was finally at least entertaining the idea of making a copy, but she wanted it to be an exact copy, down to the smallest detail. They called me after a couple of days and asked me to bring the ring to a jeweler to get a proper quote on the cost of making a duplicate. I agreed to an extended lunch break and went to the local jeweler. I got the ring from the safety deposit box and I guarded it closely. I could see Sarah's eyes light up with greed the moment she saw it again. She reached her hand out and asked to wear it just one more time, then pouted like a child when I told her no. For all I know, she could have taken off running the second she had it. The jeweler looked at the ring very closely for a while and said it was worth more than we thought, and that if they wanted a copy of it, it would cost a lot of money. The ring was decades old and expertly crafted by my wife's grandfather sometime in the 1940s. The jeweler was singing its praises. The diamond and sapphires were decently large for an engagement ring, and the ring itself didn't use a slim gold band, but a pretty thick and heavy one made of what was estimated to be 18 carats of gold. But there was more. The stones themselves were set in platinum, and the ring had many ornate floral carvings on it. The stones alone to make an identical ring was more than Jake's current budget, and not including antique value, making a copy of a ring just like that with that much variety of materials would cost a lot of time and labor because every part of it would have to be handcrafted. It was 5 times what Jake had saved up. The best he could have done would be to make some kind of down payment and then spend years in debt just to have the ring. Sarah enthusiastically wanted Jake to have the ring made anyways, but the cost was just too much, so the jeweler suggested they have one made that looks just the same. It didn't need to be an exact copy of the same materials. They could use a center stone that looked just similar to a diamond and replace the platinum with a similar metal, but it would have to be at a reduced cost by a lot. There was also a suggestion of looking for a modern ring that looks very similar to what's already been made, which would be far cheaper as well. well. In fact, the jeweler already had 3 rings set aside that all looked somewhat similar with a central diamond and sapphires, and they were all reasonably priced. Jake was all in for the idea, but Sarah suddenly slapped him, calling him a cheap wannabe. She then turned on her heels and called me an evil jerk again for taking the original ring back because it had already been given to her when Jake proposed, and it should still be hers regardless. Then she held up her hand in the manner one does when they expect you to put a ring on their finger and outright demanded the ring back while saying it was her right to wear it and that my daughter wouldn't need it because it would go to waste with her. She actually said it's not like my daughter would be doing the proposing to anyone since a man could just get a different ring for her someday. And when she said that, oh boy did that make me angry. And she clearly noticed how angry I was because she took a couple of steps backwards. I looked her dead in the eye and said that my wife's family ring will never be hers. It wasn't Jake's to give away and he knew it. That's why he went out of his way to steal it while I wasn't home because he hoped I wouldn't demand it back if he used it, but neither he nor she had any right to it. Then I said that it's entitled people like her that are what's wrong with the world now. She acts like whatever she wants should just be handed to her, and she's lusted after my wife's ring ever since Jake first showed it to her. That whole speech was a bit long-winded with some conjecture, I know, but I just couldn't hold myself back verbally anymore. My wife used to tell me that if I wanted to insult someone, I always figured out exactly what to say. After I said all of that to Sarah's face, she aimed to slap me too, but I guess the look in my eyes was enough to make her turn away and storm out instead, while very loudly making some sort of intelligible tantrum noises that hurt my ears. She even intentionally knocked down a counter display on her way out. Jake was glaring at me with absolute rage, but didn't say anything until I asked him why he was with such an awful woman, but he just said that he loved her and followed after. To his credit, she is very beautiful, but it's really just skin deep. Sarah wouldn't talk to Jake for a while, and then a few days later told him that they were through because she felt like he didn't value her enough to get her the ring that she deserved, and that she couldn't imagine having me as a father-in-law. She said she felt thoroughly humiliated by me and cried that people all think she's a gold digger now. But honestly, I don't think they are wrong. I mean, she slapped my son just for suggesting that they make a cheaper version of an expensive ring that he could not afford, then threw a massive tantrum just because I wouldn't hand over the original when she demanded it. That's the behavior of a gold digger if I have ever seen any. And while it is an assumption on my part, exactly how long would Sarah have stayed with my son if someone rich came along and swept her off her feet? Would she have been inclined to still stand by him? Something tells me not so. I honestly feel like she just wanted the ring and nothing else. Right after the incident with the breakup, Jake did try to get into the house again while I wasn't home. To do what exactly, I have no idea, but if I were to speculate, he may have been after the cash I kept in my safe, or thought that the family jewels were still in the house. I hadn't told him at that point that I had them stored in a safety deposit box, and I didn't really want to think my own son would break in for either of those reasons. But he stole from us once, and he could do it again. It was suggested that I should probably change the locks on my house, so I ended up doing just that. So now Jake's key no longer works, and I'm even looking to get cameras set up in my house as well. My daughter Amber called me after Jake showed up and said that she was terrified while he was banging on the front door, demanding to be let in. I called his cell and he didn't pick up, but I guess it spooked him because Amber said he left right after his phone started ringing. He has a very specific ringtone for me, so he knew it was me calling in an instant. Jake later called that evening, but before he could start yelling at me, I demanded to know what in the world he was doing trying to break into my house while I wasn't home. He scared his sister and she nearly called the police. Jake dodged the question by being angry about me changing the locks, stating that I don't trust him. And I said, you know what? I don't trust you, especially not after what he's done. Jake then fired back, saying that I couldn't just be happy for him, and that if his mom was still alive, she would have wanted him to use that ring to propose. At this point, I saw red, and I said that if she wanted that, she would have put that in the will. So he began to whine and say that it was all my fault. He explained exactly what Sarah said when she broke up with him, and how she called me a horrible person, among other things. Then ranted about how I always thought Sarah was never good enough for him, but I never said she wasn't good enough for him. I barely knew Sarah to begin with, and I never once got in the way of him being with her until he stole the ring. He tried to deny that, but I asked him when I'd ever had anything bad to say about Sarah prior to the ring incident. He really sounded like he was trying to think hard, but even he couldn't remember any actual time because I barely saw this woman ever while they were dating. I wasn't even aware they were dating until at least 3 months had gone by in their relationship. But that was all besides the point. Why on earth was he trying to get into my house? And when I asked him again, he refused to answer. So I answered for him. I said if he was after the ring or any of my family jewels, they have been moved to a safe, secure location that only I have access to. And if he was trying to break into my safe for my emergency cash fund, there's no way he would ever get it open. At this point, I may have hit the nail on the head with at least a few of those things, because Jake just had a long silent pause on the line. Then he told me that he's made up his mind to put in for a transfer at his job and sell his condo. He wants to move as far away as possible and never speak to me again. His last words to me were to have a nice life with my favorite child. I don't understand how my son was so completely changed on this level in just a year. I never actually called Sarah a manipulative gold digger until recently. I said she had my son wrapped around her finger and she loves jewelry, though I guess that's not all that different in the long run. But in truth, she is very manipulative, and she definitely is a gold digger, especially after the drama that she put on to try and keep a ring that was never hers. I mean, she spent days crying in bed over a ring that she knew was stolen, and then had her huge tantrum at not being able to get it back or a copy of it. And now, because of her, my son has chosen to wash his hands of me and his sister altogether. I am honestly devastated, but at the same time, I'm furious that my son would do such things just to appease this witch of a woman he'd only been dating for about 8 months. That's not enough time dating before proposing. I dated my wife for over 2 years before popping the question. I shudder to think what things would have been like if that witch had actually married my son. I know Jake is going to blame me for a long time, and I'm not sure if I'll ever speak to him again, but I hope one day we can reconcile. But for now, I think we just need some time apart. Amber is also very upset. She's extremely thankful that I got the ring back for her, but she is just as shocked as I was that Jake has become like he is now. And she's referring to him as a brute for how he shoved her aside when he stole the ring. Thankfully, she has a great support system with me and the rest of the family, which is something I know Jake doesn't have right now. Multiple family members have called or messaged him just to tell him off, and his now former best friend even came to me to apologize. He and Jake got into a nasty fight over what he had done, and when his own best friend since elementary school didn't see things from his side, Jake just cut him off as well. Jake's ex-girlfriend Sarah also got in trouble with her own family. Her parents contacted me to ask for my side of the story and then apologized for their daughter's behavior. They only knew a small bit of what happened, but they were appalled to hear about the way she acted. Like Jake, they said she used to be a much kinder person, but in the past few years she's changed so much. They are severely disappointed in her, especially after everything they've done to help her out. I can only hope that one day my son comes to his senses and finds happiness again. Whether or not he ever chooses to speak to me again is honestly up to him, but until then, I'll hold out hope that he'll one day return to being the kind person that he once was. That was a roller coaster of a story. There's so much to unpack here, but first and foremost, the original poster is not the jerk in this situation. Their son literally stole from them in a very serious way, a family heirloom that's absolutely irreplaceable, and they did everything correctly in my opinion. Jake in this story is unbelievably entitled, not to mention his crazy girlfriend. I mean, I'm with the original poster here. That lady was probably going to get that ring and then dip. There was no way she was going to stay with Jake in the first place. She probably would have just put that ring on her finger and then cut town, because based on what we've been told, it really seems like she's that kind of person. So good for the original poster for putting his foot down and retaining the ring that means so much to his family. And hopefully, for the sake of the original poster, him and Jake are able to make amends. But I think either way, the original poster hasn't done anything wrong, and all of the blame squarely lands on Jake's shoulders. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.